Chapter 2813 Flee in Panic. Chapter 2813 Flee in Panic. 2813 Flee in Panic. I have no time to waste on you, Ling Han said as he resolutely channeled the eighth seal. Boom! A surge of power exploded out of him. The eighth seal could increase his battle prowess by 27 times. Just what kind of concept was this? The ninth seal could only do so by 15 times. What? Ping Xinghai couldn't help exclaiming. He was too surprised to find that Ling Han's battle prowess could still be increased. This. Obviously the secret technique being used by the other party had not changed. Could it be that he had also mastered another heavenly venerable seal, and it was of an even higher level than the previous one? Pung! Ping Xinghai was only absent-minded for a brief moment, and immediately suffered a punch. The impact caused him to be cast several kilometers away. He could only feel the boiling sensation in his chest, and blood spilled from the corner of his mouth. Ling Han did not follow up on his assault to deliver another blow, but turned his gaze to Hong Huang, his killing intent rising. Brother Situ, Brother Ma, save me! Hong Huang hurriedly asked for help from the second-tier heavenly venerates. He naturally knew that even if it was an ordinary first-tier heavenly venerate who made a move against him, it would be impossible for him to equally match the opponent, not to mention that Ling Han was the enemy this time, and was so outrageously strong. Hong Huang would be blasted to smithereens in a single blow. The expressions of those two second-tier heavenly venerates revealed their awkwardness, with them being somewhat trapped in a dilemma. If they were to act, they wouldn't be able to stop Ling Han at all, and would just be asking for humiliation themselves. But if they did not take action, then were they supposed to just watch their companion being bullied or even killed? Ling Han, please give us some face, a second-tier heavenly venerate said. My teacher is a fifth-tier heavenly venerate, Gui Junjie. I will remember this favor of yours. Another second-tier heavenly venerate also said. My ancestor is the fourth-tier heavenly venerate by the name of Louis. I sincerely ask Brother Ling to show some mercy. They all brought up their powerful backers, knowing that it was impossible to make Ling Han bow his head based on their own merits. Ling Han chuckled. So when I don't give you face, you will bring up the fourth-tier and fifth-tier heavenly venerates to suppress me? Sigh, I don't have a precedent of giving rubbish face, not this time, nor in the future. With a stretch of his hand, Ling Han instantly captured Hong Huang. How was it possible for a second tier to be able to stop him? Xiao, Ping Xinghai leapt back towards them, his face full of malice. To be honest, it was possible for him and Ling Han to be equally matched in a fight. Given that the time for the heavenly venerable seal to release energy was limited, as long as he could endure it, he was completely capable of gaining the upper hand with the secret technique that he had mastered. However, gaining the upper hand was one thing, and being able to suppress Ling Han was another matter altogether. Besides, what if he wasn't able to survive through Ling Han's explosion of power? Thinking about it this way, he only desired to obtain the heavenly venerable seal that Ling Han had more. If he could master it, how powerful would his battle prowess be then? The question was, could he do it? Hong Huang, where is the sealed emotion heavenly venerable right now? Ling Han asked, lifting up Hong Huang. Before, this would have been easy as the sealed emotion heavenly venerable had to be on the fourth spatial level of the realm battlefield. However, presently there was only the eighth spatial level in the realm battlefield, and with the Genesis world being so vast, where could Ling Han go to locate him? Hong Huang gazed at Ling Han coldly and said, If you want to kill me, then do it. But if you think that I'll betray my master, you're dreaming. He had great reverence for the sealed emotion heavenly venerable. The latter wasn't just a teacher to him, but was equivalent to a god. Ling Han nodded. Although I find your behavior shameless, at least you have some shining points. Humph, what's the point of such talk? Hong Huang raised his neck. He didn't care about being spared or killed, because the sealed emotion heavenly venerable carried a mark of his life, so even if he were to die, it wouldn't matter. As long as the sealed emotion was still alive, Hong Huang could be resurrected once again. Therefore, he was able to have no regard for his life and confront Ling Han head-on. Okay, I'll send you off then. Ling Han's grip tightened, and suddenly Hong Huang's neck was tilted at a crooked angle. He died on the spot. Committing murder right in my face, you are really arrogant, Ping Xinghai said sternly. He was extremely angry. Ling Han smiled. Okay, let me ask, who among you wants to be my enemy? His gaze swept across the crowd. With the exception of Ping Xinghai, no one dared to look at him as they all lowered their heads. Ha! Ha! Ping Xinghai sneered, causing the people behind him to feel chills down their spine. Do you dare to fight? He asked the people behind him. Those people hesitated for a moment before saying, We will go all the way with Brother Ping. Only then did Ping Xinghai nod his head. With me restraining him, he won't be able to hurt you. Once his heavenly venerable seal has been released completely, we can take him down. Yes. Everyone nodded. Ling Han shook his head. Since all of you insist on a fight, then I'll fulfill your wish. Let's go! Ping Xinghai rushed over first, unleashing a shot towards Ling Han. He had to restrain Ling Han, otherwise the five of them would definitely be killed in an instant if Ling Han was allowed to unleash his might. You have overestimated your own abilities! Ling Han snorted, and he also unleashed a shot at full strength. Pun! He had boosted himself with the 8th seal, and his battle prowess was extremely terrifying. With a single kick, he sent Ping Xinghai flying away. Although he didn't manage to hurt the other party, it also made him fly backwards for more than a few kilometers. Having drawn out the distance at this moment, Ling Han immediately went charging murderously towards Lu Xianting and the others. He showed no mercy. Since he had already made a move, he would kill them. Pun! With just a single punch, a first-tier heavenly venerate was blasted into smithereens. He didn't even have the qualifications to let Ling Han know his name. Damn it! Ping Xinghai came charging back murderously, with his face showing a furious expression. He had even made a declaration just earlier that as long as he had Ling Han restrained, then everything would be fine. However, he had barely finished speaking those words, and a lackey was instantly killed. How embarrassing for him! How could he face the crowd? He turned his anger into strength, and attacked Ling Han frantically. Ling Han was indifferent to it. He casually countered the attacks, and he sent Ping Xinghai flying with a kick once again after a few blows. Fuck! Ping Xinghai couldn't help cursing when he was sent flying again, his cultivation level and confidence notwithstanding. Within the past hour, Ling Han's battle prowess had an absolute advantage over his, so he had no problem defending himself, but intending to stop Ling Han from committing murder was truly wishful thinking. He was too optimistic, thinking that he could stop Ling Han. Sure enough, Ling Han punched out again, and blasted Lu Xianting into smithereens. Once he had made a move, he was absolutely merciless. Retreat! Retreat! Ping Xinghai came back to prevent Ling Han from killing any further. He was able to block Ling Han at this point. Although it was only a few moves, a heavenly venerate would only need this little bit of time to escape. The remaining three quickly dispersed. In fact, there was no need for Ping Xinghai to shout it, as they were already planning to retreat. Although they had reverence for Ping Xinghai and his master, who was a 5th-tier heavenly venerate, it was absolutely impossible for them to risk their own lives for this. Ping Xinghai blocked a few moves, and was sent flying by a kick from Ling Han once again. However, in such a brief moment, those three had fled without a trace. He laughed out loud. This was the first time that he had gained an upper hand after fighting for so long, although such an upper hand was indeed too pitiful. Ling Han, you have already shown off your ability and offended too many people. You will have a miserable end, Ping Xinghai said. All three people who were killed by Ling Han had powerful backers, with their masters or elders being at least 3rd-tier heavenly venerates. Ling Han shook his head. You should take care of yourself first. He charged forward murderously. No matter what, he was determined to beat up this guy and teach him a lesson. Pun! 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 He kept kicking. He kicked Ping Xinghai around like a ball. Ping Xinghai was about to explode from anger. However, there was nothing he could do about it given the difference in strength. Since the lackeys had already fled, and he had no intention to continue fighting, what was the point in him getting a thrashing? He feigned launching another attack, then turned around and disappeared. Chapter 28:14 Sealing the Doorway. Chapter 28:14 Sealing the Doorway. 28:14 Sealing the Doorway. Ling Han did not pursue. He was indeed stronger than Ping Xinghai, but this superiority was limited. Furthermore, there was a time restraint to using heavenly venerable seals. If he could not suppress the other party in a short period of time, he himself would be falling into a disadvantage instead. Ling Han shook his head. It could not be helped. Who asked him not to have mastered a higher-level heavenly venerate technique? He should improve his fists of fury so that it would correspond to his strength. Since he had already walked out a path of his own, he naturally should also create a corresponding technique. In this instant, Ling Han was slightly distracted, thinking about how he was going to fuse fists of fury with this unique path that he had walked. He shivered, and regained his wits. Now was not the time to be thinking about this. Ling Han shook his head, and his feet moved. He began circling around this giant tomb, looking for an entrance. Not too long later, he discovered that the entrance was a pair of stone doors. They were 300 meters tall and as wide as 210 meters, looking very grand. Was this actually the tomb of a dead man, or a palace? Ling Han was a little uncertain now. You are already dead, yet you are still so particular? Forget it. It was not his tomb in any case. The doors had already been pushed open, and Ling Han did not hesitate, either, striding inside. This doorway was huge, and the passage inside was also wide, matching the giant doorway. The walls glowed by themselves, but one could not see too far, as their range of vision was blocked by something. Strange, Ling Han thought. As he walked, he stretched out his hand to touch the walls, sensing the surroundings around him. What surprised him was that his divine sense was actually unable to penetrate this wall. It was like, the walls of the realm battlefield, which had the intercepting powers of the divine sense of a heavenly venerate. Though this could not compare to devouring metal, it was still very valuable. It was the main material used to construct heavenly venerable tier grand formations. In fact, it could even unleash the might of the sixth tier. Ling Han felt an impulse to knock down this wall and stow it away. If it could be used to lay down defensive walls for his Ling city, then an ordinary heavenly venerate would need some amount of time to be able to invade successfully, leaving them enough time to take measures. Forget it. He had best find that heavenly venerable seal first. His own strength was what was most important. Ling Han forcefully suppressed his impulse and strode forwards, but he had already set his eyes on this place. The passageway was very long, and after walking for over 50 kilometers, it suddenly became clear ahead. A massive plaza appeared, so high that the ceiling could not be seen. Because there was something invisible blocking their vision, one could only feel that it was very, very high. Ling Han was not the only one in the plaza. Instead, there were a lot of people, who were divided into multiple smaller groups, scattered around here and there. Looking around, he found out that every single person here was basically a heavenly venerate. What were so many people waiting around here for? Ling Han's gaze wandered, and he very quickly located the karmic life heavenly venerable and the others, so strode over to them. Have you made any gains? The Empress asked. She and Hunyo naturally knew Ling Han best, and knew that he had to have attained some kind of enlightenment when he had stayed behind and not gone with them previously. Ling Han nodded. Very good. He paused and then asked, What is going on now? The karmic life heavenly venerable replied, Though that ancient heavenly venerate has died, he has left behind his inheritance. Roughly speaking, there are a total of 4 areas here, and they are Azure Dragon, White Tiger, Vermillion Bird, and Black Tortoise Palace, respectively. This is the White Tiger Palace. Ling Han gave an O. No wonder they were able to find the right place just by wandering around. As it turned out, there were palaces in all 4 directions. Indeed, whichever direction they headed in, they would encounter a right place. Then why are we all standing here? He asked. The karmic life heavenly venerable shook his head and sighed. To enter into the palace and obtain the inheritance, one would have to pass a test. But the problem now is that there are 3 4th-tier heavenly venerates here, and they have worked together to seal off the path, not allowing anyone a chance to accept the test. Oh? Ling Han was surprised. These 3 people were really overbearing. Could it be that they weren't afraid that they would arouse public resentment? Upon second thought, with how strong a 4th-tier heavenly venerate, one would be able to match 100 3rd tiers, and just how many 3rd tiers were there in total here? Hence, so what if the 3 of them were overbearing? At least they hadn't chased everyone off. Then have they undergone the test? Ling Han asked. The karmic life heavenly venerable shook his head. How could they have not? It is just that they have not passed. Ling Han was surprised. Being able to become 4th tiers, just how powerful and domineering did they have to be, and the 3 of them actually hadn't passed the test. This really was quite hard to believe. He asked smilingly. Then what do they mean by this? They themselves were not able to obtain it, and forbade others from even trying? The karmic life heavenly venerable sighed, and replied. Who knows what they're thinking? Perhaps they wish to summon their own disciples to try. After all, one does not allow benefits created by one's own work to go to others. The large black dog interrupted. Ling Han nodded. That may be possible. Who cares what the possible reason is? Most importantly, these 3 bastards have blocked off the way, and we will not have any chance to make an attempt at all. The large black dog cursed fluidly, filled with displeasure. Let me take a look, Ling Han said. He walked forwards, and not too long afterwards, he saw 3 young people presently sitting in cross-legged positions. However, it was only their appearance that was young. Any one of them had incredibly deep, profound gazes, exuding an aura marked by vicissitudes of time. Not far behind them, there was a completely silver palace that was built like a fierce tiger ready to pounce, as if it would erupt with a world-shaking strike at any instant. The palace had no windows, and there was only a single entry, which was the main door. But though the front door was open, it was a revolving light door. Clearly, entering through this door would not lead into the palace, but rather the test that the karmic life heavenly venerable had spoken about. Because some people had already entered the light door before these 3 heavenly venerates had sealed off the doorway. However, they had all come back out after failing, and that was how others knew about the situation here. Ling Han observed. Though these 3 4th-tier heavenly venerates looked relaxed and laid back, and were sitting very casually, Ling Han was very clear. They had sealed off all routes that would lead to entering into the light door. Wherever one was barging in from, they would be met with the combined attacks of the 3 heavenly venerates. These were 4th tiers. What 3rd tier would have this kind of courage to take their attacks head-on? A 4th-tier heavenly venerate suddenly looked towards Ling Han, his eyes extremely sharp, causing pain in Ling Han's own eyes as he was almost blinded. However, when this heavenly venerate saw that Ling Han was only a 1st-tier heavenly venerate, he withdrew his gaze after a single glance, not bothering to spare more attention on him. Ling Han stepped back, channeling the indestructible heaven's scroll. After a long while, the pain in his eyes finally subsided. He had to admit that a 4th tier was indeed strong. The fact that Ling Han could kill He Le Kun was completely due to the letter that Chu Hao had given to him. Otherwise, he would have only been able to last for 40+ moves or so at most, and the combined forces of 3 great 4th tiers would be sufficient to kill him with a single blow. If Ling Han took the risk and barged in forcefully, the chances of him directly collapsing would be even higher. Thus, Ling Han returned to the Empress's side. It is now a stalemate, Ling Han said. The Empress and the others nodded. Though they knew that Ling Han was very strong and extremely freakish, he was only a 1st tier, after all. It was very normal that he would be unable to contend with a 4th tier. So we just give up? The large black dog asked, unwilling to resign. Or should we go and take a look at the other 3 palaces? Ling Jianxue suggested. Ling Han thought for a while. You guys go to the other 3 palaces first. I will wait here. What are you waiting for? Ling Han slowly replied. As long as another 4th-tier heavenly venerate arrives, even if he will also join this trio, there will definitely be a process before that. That moment is key to breaking this stalemate. Chapter 28:15 28:15 Instigating. Chapter 28:15 2815 Instigating. 2815 Instigating. Ling Han insisted on staying here, so the karmic life heavenly venerable and the others did not persuade him further, and left. Even if Ling Han guessed correctly, and the balance between the 3 great heavenly venerates would be broken when a 4th-tier heavenly venerate arrived, Ling Han would be the only one that could take hold of that fleeting instant. Otherwise, someone with the strength of a 1st-tier or 2nd-tier heavenly venerate would only be instantly killed by a 4th-tier. Ling Han's companions left, hoping that there wasn't anybody as overbearing as these blocking the entrance in the other 3 palaces. Ling Han waited patiently. In any case, he was not wasting time, as he was presently modifying the Fists of Fury. This process needed an extensive amount of time. Thankfully, though his time physique could not take effect on his physical body, there was completely no problem with providing a boost to his divine sense, allowing him to slowly stroll in the extensive flow of time. It had already been a long time since Ling Han had last studied the Fists of Fury. That was because he had long ago obtained a heavenly venerate technique, its might far surpassing Fists of Fury, so what need was there for him to expend the effort? It was only now when the heavenly venerate technique could no longer catch up to his battle prowess that he was forced to study Fists of Fury. Time passed by endlessly, and Ling Han's improvement came very fast. The might of Fists of Fury soared, reaching peak stage 9th heaven. But after that, it slowed down. What heavenly venerate technique had not been created through countless years of accumulated experience and knowledge? Even if Ling Han used his time physique, whereby one day was equivalent to close to 3 years under normal conditions, he was still unable to complete his breakthrough in a short period of time. Ling Han was not worried. This was something that he had produced from his own studies. As long as it advanced to the heavenly venerable tier, his battle prowess would definitely spike greatly. After several days, Ling Han was still stuck with the heavenly venerable tier. He stopped. This was not something that could be done overnight. He should have a change of pace. Huh! He paused slightly, and realized that there were currently a few familiar people walking towards him. It was Ping Xinghai and his group. They had actually come here as well? Ling Han's eyes darted around, and a smile appeared at the corners of Ling Han's lips. If there was anyone who was familiar with him, they would be able to guess that this guy had to be having some mischievous plans in mind. With Ling Han's thought, his appearance changed again, and his aura also changed accordingly. Those stronger than him could see through his disguise, but under circumstances when strength was equal on both sides, this was very safe. Ling Han did not move immediately, but rather waited first. Ping Xinghai naturally was stopped by those 3 4th tiers as well. He was just a 3rd tier, and though this was already enough to stand among the ranks at the summit of the Genesis world, a 4th tier was still enough to overcome a 3rd tier. There was completely no need to give any face. He was very angered, and had even announced the name of his master, yet those 3 people still refused to bend at all. This had gone too far. Didn't they know that his master was a 5th tier? When Ling Han saw how this guy's expression became menacing, he felt like it was about time, and thus strode out. Halt! What do you want? A 1st tier immediately yelled at Ling Han. Ling Han raised his clasped fists. I am Nailan Chi Kong, and I have a matter to discuss with Brother Ping. How dare you? A mere 1st tier heavenly venerate actually dares to treat a 3rd tier as an equal? That 1st tier heavenly venerate's eyes turned cold as he glared at Ling Han. Ling Han smiled. Brother Ping, don't you think those 3 people have gone too far by sealing off the doorway and forbidding us entry? Originally, Ping Xinghai had ignored Ling Han completely, but these words just happened to be exactly what he was feeling, making his expression change slightly. He looked towards Ling Han. What ideas do you have? He was very displeased. Previously, before they had entered here, their forces had been already damaged, and now they were even blocked off from entering. When had he suffered such treatment before? Ling Han smiled and said, "While the might of 4th tier heavenly venerates is frightening, Brother Ping is the disciple of a Lord 5th tier, and you yourself are a 3rd tier. You only have to holler, and with the displeasure of everyone present, they would definitely all unite underneath Brother Ping's banner. By then, everyone could rush forth together, and a great number of people would definitely be able to barge in through that door." Ping Xinghai hesitated slightly, yet humphed and retorted, "Are you trying to use me like a tool?" This guy was not stupid. True, how could any idiot be able to become a heavenly venerate? Ling Han naturally would not give up, and continued, "Your words are incorrect, Brother Ping. When one comes across injustice, one should stand up. We are all cultivators, so isn't what we are pursuing the settling of debts of gratitude and revenge quickly? Though those 3 lords are strong, they still can't blot out the heavens with one hand. It is one thing for them to be strong and enter first. But they have not gained anything, yet still wish to stop others. That is going too far. I think that with Brother Ping's natural talent and strength, you will definitely be able to breeze through the test left behind by that ancient heavenly venerate. Doing such a thing is completely eating away at Brother Ping's fated opportunity. This has really gone too far." These words were reasonable and justified, and added with the fact that Ping Xinghai had been displeased in the first place, it easily resulted in a resonance. He humphed. Though he had not replied, he was already moved. Ling Han continued further, paying a considerable number of compliments, so disgustingly sweet that even he himself wanted to throw up. After long periods of time in the large black dog's company, not only was Ling Han top tier in the ability to throw insults, his ability of pushing others onto a pedestal was not to be underestimated either, his every word eliciting satisfaction from Ping Xinghai. It should be known that Ping Xinghai was presently in a state of displeasure. Previously, his lackeys had been killed, and now they were blocked here. Though his 3 lackeys were still being yes-men to him, they bore a lot of secret resentment for him. He knew about this, but he had indeed experienced a great loss at Ling Han's hands, so he could not refute it. Now, with Ling Han pushing him further and further up onto a pedestal, he naturally felt extremely pleased. All right. It can be no one but me, so I shall take this responsibility. Ping Xinghai nodded, appearing very heroic. The reason he could be persuaded was naturally because of himself. Just like how Ling Han had said, Ping Xinghai had absolute trust in his natural talent. He was certain that he would be able to barge through the test ahead, and obtain the inheritance of that ancient heavenly venerate. Defeated by Ling Han, he presently felt an incredible yearning for a higher-level heavenly venerable seal. Ping Xinghai was swift in his decision. Immediately he began to move, communicating with the various groups. He himself was a 3rd tier, and added with the fact that he was backed by a 5th tier, there really were a considerable number that were willing to join him. Previously it was because no one was organizing them, so they were in a state of disunity. Now that they had allied together, they could no longer be underestimated. There were a considerable number of people here that were backed by 4th tiers and 5th tiers, and they were sure that these 3 4th tiers would not dare to deliver a fatal strike against them. Led by Ping Xinghai, they approached the entrance to the palace. "My 3 lords." Ping Xinghai clasped his fists together respectfully. "We respect the 3 of you very much, and we are certain that the 3 lords would also be understanding of us and our feelings of wanting to venture into this space to explore. We dearly hope that the 3 lords can accommodate us." A 4th tier looked towards Ping Xinghai. "You people have schemed for 2 days, and it is all so that you can force us to step aside?" Before Ping Xinghai had the chance to speak, Ling Han butted in. "You 3 old geezers, could it be that you people don't know who our young Master Ping is? He is a noble, dignified 3rd tier heavenly venerate, and his master is a 5th tier. So what if he demands that you 3 step aside? What disagreement do you have about that?" Gasp! Ping Xinghai couldn't help but inhale sharply. How could Ling Han say these words? Even if Ping Xinghai was thinking the same thing, he could not say it out loud, and definitely could not say these words in full public, right to their faces. That would be sparking off a war. How dare you! A fourth tier dressed in black robes rebuked with a glare, exuding boundless might, and the other two fourth tiers also looked menacing, looking like they were ready to attack. Ping Xinghai hurriedly tried to make amends and said, "My three lords, please don't. Don't be arrogant. We have the advantage in numbers, so what do we have to fear from you guys?" Ling Han butted in again. Holy fuck. Chapter 2816 Tricked. Chapter 2816, 2816 Tricked. 2816 Tricked. It was Ping Xinghai that was the leader, so Ling Han naturally was considered to be one of Ping Xinghai's people. The black-robed fourth tier looked menacingly at Ping Xinghai, and stretched out his hand, but he was aiming for Ling Han. "Let's charge together, guys. Rush past these doors, and the heavenly venerable seal and supreme secret technique is waiting for us," Ling Han shouted, but he was rapidly retreating himself. The giant hand descended, but Ling Han had rapidly retreated, causing a great many people to be caught in the range of this blow. There was no one who would be willing to just surrender, and added with the fact that the actions of these three fourth tiers had long since caused public outrage, everyone had already been mentally prepared to fight when they had stood together. So when they saw that the fourth tier Heavenly Venerate had attacked first, there were people that instantly moved to counterattack. With one leading the way, this instantly caused a chain reaction, and even more people moved to attack. Pun pun pun! A battle royale immediately erupted. "Humph, you people truly are reckless!" The other two fourth tiers looked towards Ping Xinghai menacingly. This had to have been deliberately planned by this boy, and his purpose was to create chaos so that he could sneak in. Otherwise, a first-tier Heavenly Venerate would not even be able to pass through the aura field that they had set up. Though fourth tiers had an overwhelming advantage, these three fourth tiers did not dare to really start a massacre. After all, there were a great many people here who were backed by people that could stand as their equals, or even surpass them. The treasure had not appeared now, so there really was no reason to offend these people just for this. Hence, the remaining two fourth-tier Heavenly Venerates had set their eyes on Ping Xinghai. To catch bandits, capture the ringleader. As long as they captured this person who had led the others to cause trouble, the others naturally would return to being a pile of scattered sand. Shwa shwa! The two great fourth-tier elites moved at the same time, grabbing towards Ping Xinghai. Ping Xinghai felt extremely wrong. Though he had gathered the others to force the three great elites to step aside, he did not have the slightest intention of sparking off a battle. That was because he knew very well that it would be useless even if all of them joined forces. It was absolutely impossible that they would be able to match these three fourth-tier Heavenly Venerates. But now, two fourth-tier elites were actually attacking him simultaneously, causing him to be overwhelmed by the flattery and honor. Why had things played out in this way? Shio! Right at this moment, a figure streaked out, leaping towards that revolving light door. Humph! Though the two fourth tiers had made their move against Ping Xinghai, how could it be that a noble, dignified fourth tier would need to go all out just to deal with the third tier? One of the fourth tiers stretched out his other hand to strike that figure, appearing extremely disdainful. This was just a mere first tier. Pun! However, he had miscalculated. Faced with this strike, that first-tier Heavenly Venerate did not dodge, but rather clenched a fist and countered his strike. You are seeking death, the fourth-tier thought. Taking on the attack of a fourth-tier head-on, even if he did not die, it would still cause severe injury. But in the next instant, his eyes bulged widely. That man actually managed to parry this strike from him. Though he had not used full power in this attack, it had still reached the third tier. Wouldn't suppressing a mere first tier be a piece of cake? Yet Ping Xinghai immediately called out, "Oh, Ling Han!" He had not recognized Ling Han, but what other first tier could match the might of a third tier? Ping Xinghai had been tricked. Realization immediately dawned on him. He had fallen for Ling Han's evil trap. This guy had done so many things, and his purpose was to instigate everyone to create an opening for him so that he could sneak in during the chaos and enter the palace. Damn it, damn it! Ping Xinghai almost spluttered out a mouthful of blood. Previously, Ling Han had killed 3 of his lackeys, and now he was actually shouting a battle cry for his sake, creating a chance for him. Just how stupid was he? Damn it! Those 2 fourth tiers were furious. They had only taken one misstep, and now the whole game was lost. They had not thought that Ling Han was the real person who had been planning to sneak in under the cover of chaos, and he was actually hiding so deeply, being a first-tier heavenly venerate that actually had the strength of 3rd tier. They both glared furiously at Ping Xinghai. This had to be one of the main culprits as well. Otherwise, why would he have so earnestly served Ling Han? Pun! The attacks of the duo landed. When a 4th tier moved, much less when 2 combined their attacks, how was a 3rd tier supposed to block that? Ping Xinghai was instantly suppressed with a single strike. Pooh! Ping Xinghai had still thrown up a mouthful of blood ultimately. His resentment overflowed. Just thinking of Ling Han appearing in front of him, he could eat Ling Han alive. He really felt very wrong playing the fool for him. Xiao! Ling Han had already rushed into the light door. Led by a mysterious energy, he appeared in a plane. There were damaged suits of armor scattered everywhere and corpses lying here and there, exuding an air of war and battle. A flag was stuck into the ground. There was no symbol on it, but only a few words. Never step back. Never step back? These were heroic words, but faced with powerful enemies, just how many people could live up to the words? Never stepping back. Moreover, retreat was also a kind of tactic. Whether it was a battle between 2 people, or a large-scale war, retreat was always an option. Ling Han had not even finished the thought when he saw that a large, massive army had appeared ahead of him. Their numbers were stunning, as great as millions, and all of them exuded an aura that reached the heavenly venerable tier. Even if these were all 1st-tier heavenly venerates, even a 4th-tier heavenly venerate would have to avoid them under the crushing force of millions of them. Never step back? Impossible! Ling Han nodded. No wonder even 3 4th-tier elites had not been able to pass this kind of test. Taking even a single step back would probably be considered failing. But the problem here was, who would be able not to retreat with an army of millions charging towards him? Ha! Ling Han erupted into loud laughter, and charged forwards. Pun! He was like a lion that pounced into a flock of lambs, charging right into the main force of the enemy troops. Brandishing both fists, he instantly sent over 100 powerful enemies flying. Faced with Ling Han, a 1st tier was completely outmatched. Pun pun pun! With a punch, powerful foes were blasted into nothing one after another, and the imagery was extraordinarily realistic. There were blood spraying and corpses collapsing here and there, exuding an intense chill. However, Ling Han knew that all this had to be only an illusion. If a 5th-tier heavenly venerate could really create such a great army of heavenly venerates, wouldn't this world be completely chaotic? White tiger symbolized slaughter, so the test here was a test of slaughter. If so, he would just kill to his heart's content. Ling Han's black locks fluttered wildly as he unleashed a massacre. However, though his strength reached the 3rd tier, he still couldn't hold up to the fact that the number of heavenly venerates here was really too great, so he had still taken a few blows, causing him to throw up blood and break bones. However, as Ling Han channeled the indestructible Heaven Scroll, he maintained his battle prowess. His hands balled into fists, and he unleashed fists of fury. This was just the right opportunity to use these countless heavenly venerates to temper his supreme fist intent. Ling Han was the type to be more motivated the greater the pressure on him was. Every time he sustained injury, his motivation would increase slightly, and comprehension dawned on him continuously, endlessly unfurling in his mind. Ling Han laughed loudly, and felt a great sense of satisfaction and a pleasure he could not describe. So what if he was wounded? What cultivator would not suffer injury? Time passed endlessly. 1 year, 10 years, 100 years, but there was never a pause to the battle. More and more troops appeared, wanting to drown Ling Han completely. These enemies only had the aura of heavenly venerates, but their strength was truly limited. Otherwise, even Ling Han would not dare go so crazy, not taking one step back even when faced with millions of first-tier heavenly venerates. But it seemed like this kind of battle would never end, and even one with the strongest and most resolute willpower would begin to falter. Yet Ling Han enjoyed this. He treated this battle as the best way to temper his fist technique, completely forgetting his intention for entering into this place. He forged onwards bravely, not taking even half a step back. Chapter 28:17 28:17 Being Taught. Chapter 28:17 28:17 Being Taught. 28:17 Being Taught. It was unknown how long had passed. Ling Han only felt the sudden surge in power in his fist technique. With a punch, hundreds of enemies flew into the air simultaneously, and then all of them exploded to bits. Although he had been able to send hundreds of them flying with a single punch before, at most only dozens of them would have been killed by him on the spot, while the others would only have suffered a little injury. But this time, his punch was so powerful that he could kill hundreds of people in one go. Realization came to Ling Han abruptly. He found that the Fists of Fury already possessed Heavenly Venerable Tier power. He had finally advanced this fist technique to the level of Heavenly Venerable Tier. Of course, it just recently advanced to the Heavenly Venerable Tier, and it would take a long time to fully match his battle prowess of the 3rd tier. When Ling Han came back to his senses, he realized that his body was riddled with injuries, with every wound so deep that even his bones were visible. Normally, he ought to have lost his battle prowess with such serious injuries, or at least see his battle prowess plummet, not to mention being so severely wounded to the point of just waiting for death, right? But he didn't feel that way at all. Apart from being exhausted, his battle prowess was at its peak. He wasn't surprised, because he knew that all of this had to be an illusion, but it was so real that even a 4th-tier heavenly venerate could hardly tell the difference. That resulted in no one having passed the test and successfully entering into the palace. Ling Han laughed loudly. Come on, to say nothing of 1 million or 10 million, no matter how many, I will take them all on. He continued on with the killing spree. This was an extremely rare chance to train. Perhaps only a 5th-tier heavenly venerate could create such a setup, so it would be too silly not to seize this opportunity. However, the length of training this time far exceeded Ling Han's expectations. 10,000 years, 100,000 years, 1 million years. Time continued to pass, but the battle showed no signs of stopping. This inevitably would make people wonder would there never be an end to it. Ling Han firmly believed that since the test was not over yet, he should study the fist technique, so he didn't waste time. 2 million years, 5 million years, 10 million years. Finally, when the count reached 10 million years, there was no new army. Ling Han felt his body tremble. He instantly appeared in a new place, and he saw that he was inside a palace. He looked at his body again. There wasn't even a little bit of injury, but he exuded a sense of being worn out, as if he had gone through eternity. How long have I been out in the world of consciousness? Ling Han murmured. He checked his body. Having reached his heights, he could calculate how much time had passed just by looking at the subtle changes in his body. It was actually 10,000 years. Wait, I have fought in the world of consciousness for 10 million years. But the reality is that 10,000 years have passed, which matches exactly the time acceleration effects of my physique. At the Heavenly Venerable Tier, it is impossible for the physical body to be either accelerated or decelerated. It is tempered by fundamental power and surpasses the regulations. Naturally, it is not affected by regulations. Time could still be accelerated for the spirit, but this acceleration is limited to under 1,000 times. So, my physical body has been standing here for 10,000 years, but I have been fighting in the spiritual world for 10 million years. Ling Han stretched his muscles, and suddenly there was a majestic force roaring within his body. Before, when his consciousness was in another world, his physical body was in hibernation. Now that his consciousness has returned, his body suddenly became as strong as a dragon. My cultivation level has actually improved slightly. Ling Han was surprised. With the passing of 10,000 years, his progress was actually faster than when he was practicing cultivation normally, and it was even much faster at that. Battle is indeed the fastest way to improve, even in the world of consciousness. However, I have too many powers of dimension within my body, and unlike other heavenly venerates, this kind of power has no limit. I don't know how long it will take to reach the peak of the first tier, but it is still not enough for me to break through to the second tier. Instead, the Fists of Fury. Ling Han showed a satisfied smile. After 10 million years, he had advanced the Fists of Fury to the second tier, which truly made him happy. Wang, a skull suddenly floated up in front of Ling Han. What was going on? Although it was a skull, it didn't look hideous at all. The bones were light golden in color, and there was an extremely complicated seal on the skull. It was even more difficult to comprehend than the sum of the stars in the sky. In fact, Ling Han expressed joy as this was a heavenly venerable seal. He reached out and touched the skull, and a star chart suddenly appeared in his consciousness, forming a mysterious seal. Ling Han quickly sat down cross-legged. A heavenly venerable seal could only be transmitted once, so if he was to miss out any detail, it would be impossible to get it again unless his luck was heaven-defying enough to restore it under some special circumstances. Time passed quietly, and this star chart was also slowly fading. It would completely dim within 3 days at most. However, a thought flashed across Ling Han's mind. A glow appeared in his mind, and the star map reappeared immediately. He had preliminarily mastered this heavenly venerable seal, but of course it would be a long time before he could use it. Ling Han looked at the skull in front of him again. The seal on it has disappeared. As the heavenly venerable seal had been passed on to Ling Han, it was naturally impossible for it to continue existing. The skull was also shattered, transforming into countless starlight particles, flying in the air, and fusing with the great Tao of heaven and earth. A powerful psychic message also sounded in Ling Han's consciousness. I am 4 directions, who has failed in attempting to break through to the 6th tier, and has neither disciples nor descendants. In order to avoid losing the lifetime of comprehension I have learned, I have purposely arranged for this huge tomb to store 4 bones with my mark for the 4 seals that I have deduced during my lifetime to pass on to those who are predestined. If the 4 seals can be united, it can also be used to deduce a divine skill that I have once used, but if the 4 seals can't be combined, then there is no need to mention it. Boom, this message disappeared immediately without a trace. Ling Han stood upright and bowed deeply towards the palace. Senior is righteous. This junior is full of admiration. In order to pass on what he had learned, the heavenly venerate 4 directions even left remains such as his skull. It couldn't be helped. How could the heavenly venerable seals be born by any random things? Generally speaking, whoever it was would die eventually, but wasn't still being willing to leave his remains abusing himself? That was why Ling Han was full of respect for the man. He was not in a hurry to leave, and continued to comprehend the 10th seal that he had just obtained. If he didn't master it as soon as possible, it would also disappear from his mind. After more than 10 years, Ling Han suddenly discovered that there was an extra person in the palace. This was a woman, so beautiful that her beauty wasn't inferior to that of the Empress or Hu Niu at all. However, at this time her eyes were tightly closed, and there weren't any signs of life on her body. Ling Han knew that it wasn't that the other party had died, but that her consciousness had entered another world like his. She was fighting bitterly against 1,000,000 enemies all by herself. Ling Han couldn't help taking another glance at this woman. She was so beautiful that it would surely cause people to be intoxicated with her beauty. However, Ling Han immediately extracted himself, sat cross-legged, and attempted to comprehend the heavenly venerable seal in his consciousness. Time passed quietly. 1,000 years, 5,000 years. Nearly 10,000 years had passed, and Ling Han suddenly opened his eyes. He had completely mastered the 10th seal. When he channeled it, he found that his efficiency in cultivating had increased 17 times. This not only far surpassed the more widely known 7 seals, but also surpassed the 9th seal, which came from the fusion of the essence of countless 3rd-tier heavenly venerates. At this moment, there was a sudden movement of an incomparably powerful aura. Chapter 2818 Mysterious Beauty. Chapter 2818, 2818 Mysterious Beauty. 2818 Mysterious Beauty. Ling Han suddenly looked at the other person in the palace. This huge, overwhelming, and indescribable aura came from this woman. She had passed the test, and her consciousness had returned to her body. Boom, the aura vibrated for a brief moment, and then completely returned to the woman's body, without leaking even a tiny bit of it. Although it was unleashed for just a split second before being drawn back again, Ling Han was extremely shocked. He already had a glimpse of the powerful nature of this woman. A 4th-tier heavenly venerate. No wonder she was able to break through the barricade set up by those 3 4th-tier heavenly venerates outside. Being similarly at the 4th tier, if she was determined to break through, how could she be stopped by them? Moreover, Ling Han had a feeling that this woman's strength was far superior to an ordinary 4th tier's. Wang, the woman opened her eyes, and the originally dark palace suddenly lit up. Partly because her eyes were too bright, and partly because of her beauty. From the moment she opened her eyes, it made her bloom like a flower, and she couldn't be more beautiful. Ling Han was also slightly distracted by it, but he quickly calmed down. It wasn't like he hadn't seen beautiful women before, and now his only thought was to improve his strength and cultivation. If one had beautiful wives, a loving son, and a loving daughter, what more could one ask for? The woman's gaze swept across the room, and she couldn't help revealing a surprised expression, as she really didn't expect that there was a living person inside. "Are you the one who entered here 10,000 years ago?" she asked. Her voice was soft, serene, and indescribably sweet. Ling Han shook his head. "Correction, that happened 20,000 years ago." The woman was taken aback for a moment, and then immediately came to her senses, judging from the changes in her body language. She couldn't help her pretty expression changing slightly. That was to say, in the last 10,000 years, she had been so defenseless in front of Ling Han? Did this guy do anything to her? Seeing this, Ling Han quickly waved his hand. "Don't get me wrong. If I had touched even a single strand of your hair, you could have felt it even if your mind had wandered to another world." The woman nodded slowly. Indeed, despite the fact that her consciousness had wandered away, her divine sense would definitely return at first instance should her body be in any danger. It was just that this test would end in failure. However, she still cast several glances towards Ling Han. This guy actually did not have any ideas towards her for the last 10,000 years, which was truly amazing. She had full confidence in her charm. What man wouldn't be tempted? Just this weird guy. "Since you've already woken up, why didn't you leave?" the woman asked. Ling Han shrugged and lifted both his hands. "It can't be helped, as I don't know how to get out of here." This was of course a lie. He hadn't even started looking for a way to leave this place. The woman's beautiful eyes narrowed slightly. "It was said that there was an inheritance from the ancient heavenly venerate located here. Since you have arrived here one step ahead of me, I presume that you have obtained it?" "It wasn't me." Ling Han quickly shifted the blame completely. He couldn't possibly admit it. The other party was a 4th-tier heavenly venerate. If she knew that he had obtained the inheritance of the heavenly venerate, then wouldn't he be skinned alive? Of course, Ling Han was able to traverse between dimensions, so he wasn't too worried. However, he didn't want to take the risk of running into hysteria unless it was absolutely necessary. The woman seemed to have seen through Ling Han's thoughts, and said, "Don't worry, even if you have obtained the inheritance, I will not seize it by force." "For real?" How generous. Being a 4th-tier heavenly venerate, she had the strength to seize it by force. Of course Ling Han wouldn't ask this question. He merely chuckled, and pretended not to have heard her. The woman didn't expose his lie. She merely searched around in the palace, and when she found that there was indeed no inheritance, she began to look for the exit. It didn't take long before she found it. This was a one-way exit. When the two walked in, they nevertheless appeared on the plain outside. With a wave of her hand, the woman left gracefully. Ling Han was shocked. The other party really just left like that. Hadn't she already guessed that he had obtained the inheritance, yet she was still being so generous? Inconceivable. Ling Han couldn't help but raise his voice, and asked, "Who are you?" It was a pity that even when he shouted, his voice couldn't catch up with the fourth-tier heavenly venerate, and the woman disappeared into the distance in an instant. So intelligent, so forthright, and so powerful. Who exactly was she? Ling Han shook his head, and chose to walk in the opposite direction from that stunningly beautiful woman. He changed his appearance and aura again. After all, he had tricked a lot of people previously, and he felt guilty. He was walking, and almost a day later he saw another huge tomb, which was still the same as the previous one, looking like a big bowl turned upside down. Ling Han quickly found the entrance, and after entering it, there was another plaza, which made him feel that he hadn't changed venues at all. There were still many people in the plaza, most of them gathered around the entrance of the palace, and lined up there. Ling Han walked over, looked for someone, and asked about the situation here with a smile. This was the Vermillion Bird Palace. Like the White Tiger Palace, there had originally been several fourth-tier heavenly venerates standing guard here to prevent others from entering. However, as time went by, more and more strong elites came, which broke this balance of power. However, like in the White Tiger Palace, there was no one here who could pass the test. Therefore, after a long time, those fourth-tier heavenly venerates also didn't want to expend such efforts, so everyone was allowed entry, while they went on to other palaces in search of another opportunity. There was also a test here, and the difficulty was similarly exceedingly high, and there was also an upper limit on the number of people that could be accommodated. Therefore, after the current number of people was full, other people wouldn't be able to enter, so they could only line up outside. Ling Han took a look. There were not many people in line, only a dozen or so. All right, he'd line up. He had always been a very rule-abiding person. Ling Han walked over, planning to get in line. Hey, this person is so outrageously brazen. Nothing more than a first tier. Where did he get such courage? Seeing Ling Han coming over in large strides, the surrounding people all gasped in amazement. Of course, Ling Han didn't care. He walked straight to the end of the line, and stood still about 9 meters away from the person in front of him. He could not get too close, otherwise he would be mistaken for hostile by others. Unexpectedly, the person in front of him had other thoughts as he turned around and made a disdainful face at Ling Han. Ling Han instantly became unhappy. So what if you are a third tier? Do you think that I am afraid of you? What's your problem? Do I owe you anything? He also revealed a disdainful expression. Fuck, who didn't know how to show that? That third tier couldn't help sneering, and said sternly, You, a mere first tier, are really too bold. You really don't know what's good for you. Squinted eyes, can you speak properly? If you can't speak properly, let me educate you. Ling Han countered with a tit-for-tat reply. How could he be willing to suffer such maltreatment? Ha ha! That third tier snickered, but his gaze was incomparably chilly. Whose descendant are you? Don't you know that such arrogance will cause trouble for your clan? He didn't make a move, but asked this question because he was obviously fearful of Ling Han's background. After all, while most of the heavenly venerates have returned to their own dimensions, the high-level heavenly venerates basically stayed back. What if there was a 5th tier or 6th tier elite backing Ling Han? He surely didn't want to be hunted down all over the world by such an elite. Ling Han chuckled. I'll return the same words to you. That third tier had stopped laughing because the dozen or so third tier elites in front of them were all smiling, obviously enjoying the sight of him being mocked. You're seeking death. Chapter 28:19 28:19 You first. Chapter 28:19 28:19 You first. 28:19 You first. This third tier heavenly venerate moved aggressively, grabbing at Ling Han. Because he did not know how strong Ling Han's background was, he did not deliver a fatal attack, and merely wanted to capture Ling Han. Of course, if it was proven that Ling Han did not have any backer, or his backer was not strong, he would definitely kill Ling Han with a casual strike. He dared speak to a third-tier elite in this manner, so just this kind of attitude would warrant his death. Just look, how many people were laughing at him. He could not afford this embarrassment. Ling Han channeled the 10th seal, and his whole person instantly exuded an incredibly sharp killing intent, as if he had turned into the white tiger that was vicious and ruled over slaughter. His vicious might soared sky high, the murderous aura even solidifying. Ling Han met this assault with a punch. Pun! The 10th seal, added with the might of the fists of fury, instantly burst out with incomparable power. A shock wave reverberated out, and Ling Han's figure trembled, but that third-tier heavenly venerate was directly sent flying. This? Everyone was dumbfounded. Were they dreaming? How could he be so powerful? Yet Ling Han himself was very clear. Though this third-tier heavenly venerate was not much inferior to him in terms of power, he had struck too casually, and had not used any kind of heavenly venerable seal or secret technique, so how could he be able to block the might of Ling Han's punch? When did such a terrifying character appear? Someone murmured. He is practically a freak. Where did he pop out from? Ling Han flicked his hand, and closely looked at the other members of this group. Only then did realization dawn on him. As it turned out, the people who were lining up here were all third-tier heavenly venerates. It should only be third tiers that were worthy of lining up here. Once the third tiers had their turn, then it would be the second tiers, and then finally the first tiers. The hierarchy of the cultivation world was strict. A second tier would crush a first tier, and a third tier would also crush a second tier, and that was what resulted in the present situation. Ling Han, a first tier, going to line up was equivalent to having broken the rules, so it was no wonder that he would be targeted. Since Ling Han had already made his move, he naturally would not be concerned further. He glanced at the remaining 10+ third-tier heavenly venerates. Do you guys wish to battle me? None of these third tiers replied. Fighting with Ling Han would only bring them losses, and there were no profits to be gained. Why was this so? If they won, wasn't it a matter of course for a third tier to defeat a first-tier heavenly venerate? There was nothing to be proud of in that. But if they lost, they would be utterly humiliated. A noble, dignified third-tier heavenly venerate had actually lost to a first-tier heavenly venerate. Had they been living all this while for nothing? If this had been any other time before, they naturally wouldn't believe that there would be such a ridiculous thing, but a powerful feeling of alert now rose up in their hearts. This first tier was too freakish. Even if that third tier had not unleashed his full strength because he had underestimated Ling Han, it still could not change the fact that Ling Han was powerful. Pun! A loud bang resounded, and a figure streaked over from the distance, landing heavily in the plaza, and creating a powerful shock wave. Even second-tier heavenly venerates would have to go all out to be able to block the force of this shock wave, and first-tier heavenly venerates were directly sent flying from the impact. It was that third tier from before. He was extremely furious. To be sent flying by a first tier was an excruciating humiliation. You are courting death! Now, he did not care what kind of background Ling Han had. Even if the latter was the only son of a 7th-tier heavenly venerate, he would still kill him without the slightest hesitation. Hee, you speak as if you have suffered some grievous wrong. Ling Han shook his head. Ask yourself first, do you have the right to feel angry? Die! That third-tier heavenly venerate charged out, a blurry seal glowing in his hand. This time, he naturally would not make the same mistake. He was using a heavenly venerable seal and secret technique at the same time. Ling Han still responded with the fists of fury and the 10th seal. He threw a punch, and the force of his punch actually turned into a white tiger that was several hundred meters in length, and pounced right on that third-tier heavenly venerate. Pun! That third tier brandished a palm in response, but the white tiger seemed to be solid, and was actually pushing him backwards. Not only was he pushed back to his original position, he was still retreating further than that, showing the absolute disadvantage that he was at. Those third tiers all narrowed their eyes at this. Ling Han's power was slightly stronger, and this was something they could accept, but what they could not accept was that Ling Han could actually force a third tier backwards with an attack from a distance. This was too exaggerated. It would have to be a 4th tier, at least, that could have such overwhelming might. But if this really was a 4th tier that had struck, that third tier would not have just been sent flying. Instead, even his body would have been blown up. This was not because Ling Han was overwhelmingly strong, but rather that the secret technique, or the heavenly venerable seal he used, had the ability to induce qualitative change, and that was why he was so inconceivably strong. Ling Han was also surprised. He had not thought that the 10th seal would have this effect. "Your temper is quite hot. Come and fight again." Ling Han crooked a finger at that third tier. That third tier's face was filled with fury. He wanted to accept the challenge, but when he thought about how he had not been a match for Ling Han even when he had gone all out, he would only be asking for his own humiliation if he made another move. His chest rose and fell rapidly, and after a long while, he clenched his fist, turned around, and sat down at the side, making no further noise. He would swallow this injustice, and he would accept this loss quietly. The other third tiers exchanged looks, and one of them suddenly spoke up and said, "Young friend's natural talent in cultivation is truly shocking, and has truly impressed us. Thus, we are willing to let young friend be the first in line." "Oh, so nice of them?" Ling Han thought for a moment, and then replied, "Then thank you." He walked to the foremost position, and waited quietly. After several days, a figure appeared in a flash, and there was another person here. This was a third-tier heavenly venerate. His expression was filled with disappointment. He shook his head, and immediately strode off, without addressing anyone. He had failed the test? Ling Han leaped, and had already entered through the light door. Instantly, he realized that he had entered into a different area. With the experience at the White Tiger Palace, Ling Han immediately realized that this was his spirit that had entered into another space. His true body should have already entered into the palace, but if he failed to pass the test, he would be expelled, just like that third tier from before. He surveyed the area. This was a land of fire. The Vermillion bird was aligned with fire, so it was not unexpected for such an environment to appear. However, both White Tiger and Vermillion bird primarily focused on offense. It was only that the White Tiger was aligned with metal, and represented sharpness capable of piercing through any enemy, while the Vermillion bird represented fire that could burn through anything. "Fine, then I will just fight to my heart's content again." Boom! The flames surged, transforming into a single word: kill. In the test at the White Tiger Palace, one could never step back, and here it had become a simple word: kill. So how intensely did he have to kill? Boom, boom, boom! The ground trembled wildly, and an incredibly colossal metallic figure appeared ahead of him. It was 300 meters tall, and seemed to be forged from metal. It had no eyes or mouth, and its face was just a blank slate. It soon reached Ling Han, and directly stretched out its arm to press down on him. It was too massive. The descent of this strike was as if a small mountain was falling down on him, golden light seeping about. Ling Han unleashed a battle cry, and still met this oncoming strike with fists of fury. He had yet to advance it to third tier, and needed this kind of intense battle to increase his fist intent. Pung! He received this attack, and the metallic figure's body trembled, instantly crumbling, and turning into countless pieces. However, this was only for an instant. These pieces immediately joined back together, reforming its body. Boom! This metallic figure sent out a strike again. Huh! It could not be killed? Ling Han raised his fist once more, and sent the metallic figure flying again. Boom! In midair, the metallic figure's body was once again shattered, but similarly, it immediately recovered again. Chapter 28 20 Vermillion Bird Seal. Chapter 28 Vermillion Bird Seal. 28 Vermillion Bird Seal. Ling Han frowned. Though he had still destroyed the metallic figure with a single strike, its power was increasing. It was at the first time, but now it was at the second tier. Boom! The metallic figure attacked for the third time. It was still a palm strike descending straight down on Ling Han. Golden light flashed, wanting to smash him dead. Ling Han replied with a punch. Boom! Amidst a massive bang, the metallic figure actually managed to parry Ling Han's strike. This was third-tier power. Pun pun pun! The metallic figure brandished both fists madly, continuously barraging Ling Han. Its speed was astonishingly fast, as if it was able to topple mountains and overturn seas. It was slowly adapting to the power of the challenger. After every time it was killed, its power would increase by another level, and if it could continue to be strengthened like this, how could it be killed? Ling Han set this thought aside first, and pounded this guy madly. Since he had yet to advance the fists of fury to the third tier, he might as well temper and practice well with this guy. The two men fought intensely. This metallic figure's attacks were slightly mechanical, and stuck to certain patterns. Hence, in less than 15 minutes, Ling Han punched his fist right through its chest, creating a hole directly in its chest. It quickly recovered, its fist smashing down madly. Its power had shockingly increased slightly again. Fortunately, the degree of its improvement was not very large, and it had not directly crossed the boundaries of the fourth tier. Instead, it had reached an extent that just slightly surpassed Ling Han. This made the battle become even more intense, but Ling Han was a real person, after all. After 30 minutes, he once again found an opening, and killed this metallic figure. As expected, it naturally recovered once more. Fight, 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 fight. Every time it was killed by Ling Han, the metallic figure would grow slightly stronger, making it harder and harder to kill. This was exactly what Ling Han wanted to practice his fist technique. He, too, needed an opponent that could match him. In the White Tiger Palace, the number of enemies was adequate, and here the enemy was strong enough for him. Kill, kill, kill! He killed the metallic figure time after time, but the metallic figure was also becoming stronger and stronger, and its counterattacks became more and more powerful. 1 year, 10 years, 100 years, and finally 700 years later, though Ling Han was still able to kill the metallic figure, the time he needed was increasing further and further. Moreover, he would have to pay an exorbitant price for it as well. More importantly, the metallic figure would immediately recover after it was killed, and Ling Han was not given the opportunity to recover at all. Once or twice, this would be fine, but after several dozen, and over 100 times later, the pressure on Ling Han was also extremely heavy. Ling Han was sure that this test was definitely not a matter of how long they could last. Otherwise, he would only have to drag out the battle with the metallic figure from before when it had not been so strong. What this test was focused on was killing. Just how many kills would be considered a pass? Ling Han did not know. He could only kill the metallic figure again and again, and perhaps he would be able to pass the test this time, or perhaps he still needed another 100 times, another 1,000 times, or 10,000 times. There really was not the slightest hope. Similar to the White Tiger Palace, it was very likely that one would lose all fighting spirit as the battles continued and give up. Ling Han did not. The strength of his willpower and fighting spirit was something that no one could imagine. He simply continued to temper fists of fury again and again, and after over 100,000 years had passed, he had a feeling that there was an opening that he was faced with now. If he could reach this opening, the fists of fury could advance to the third tier. If so, he would just fight to his heart's content. With a battle cry, he attacked madly. Pun, pun, pun! Very quickly, the metallic figure was killed. Again. However, it immediately made a comeback, and became even more frightening. What Ling Han wanted was precisely that his opponent was strong. If his opponent was not strong enough, it would be very hard for him to break through his own limits. Come at me! Pun! However, the metallic figure's battle prowess was already tremendously close to the fourth tier this time, and it turned around to suppress Ling Han. In an exchange of strikes, Ling Han felt his arms tremble in pain and twist unbelievably. His arms were broken, but he did not even grunt. With sheer strength of mind, power surged into him, and forcefully righted his arms as he clashed with the metallic figure again. Ling Han yelled, his power blazing and fighting spirit soaring. Pun, pun, pun! In a single stroke, he delivered several thousand punches, and instantly shattered that metallic figure. He laughed loudly. His fist of fury had finally been advanced to the third tier, and that was what allowed him to unleash such great might. However, he looked at his hands, and both his fists were gone. They had been destroyed in that intense clash from before. Ling Han channeled the indestructible heaven scroll, and his hands immediately grew back rapidly. However, the metallic figure did not come back to life again this time. Ling Han faltered, and then felt that he was being guided by great power. Wang! He appeared inside a palace. Boom! The power inside his body boiled, making him feel like he was newly born. He had passed the test, so his spirit had returned to his body, creating an explosion of power. Ling Han looked into his body, and discovered that his cultivation level had increased by a particular amount again, but this time he had only spent over 100,000 years in the spiritual world, so there was naturally not much time that had passed in the real world. Hence, his cultivation level had only increased a slight amount. Ling Han was not concerned, because Fists of Fury had already reached the 3rd tier, and was worthy of his battle prowess now. Furthermore, Fists of Fury was a cultivation technique that belonged to him completely, which was more useful than any heavenly venerate technique that anyone had taught him. Ling Han was sure that this was the best heavenly venerate technique for him on the level of the 3rd tier. Wang! A golden bone suddenly appeared ahead of him. This should be a hip bone, and there was a blurred seal on it. His inheritance was here. Ling Han stretched out his hand to touch it. Boom! Instantly, a seal flashed in his mind, as if countless flames were burning, wanting to turn his mind into a sea of fire. The heavenly venerate 4 directions' voice rang out again, and the words he said were the exact same words that he had said in the White Tiger Palace. Ling Han began to study the seal. The time needed for this was very long. 10,000 years passed, and he finally stood up, a smile appearing on his face. 11th seal, got it. With the boost from the seal, the speed of Ling Han's cultivation could increase to 17 times, which was equivalent to the 10th seal's effect. The heavenly venerate 4 directions has said that with the 4 seals merged into one could learn a secret technique of his. However, that mysterious woman had been able to pass through the White Tiger Palace, so she may also be able to pass through Azure Dragon Palace and Black Tortoise Palace. And, judging by the direction that she had taken, she should have gone to the Azure Dragon Palace one. If she has taken the seal from the Azure Dragon Palace, then even if I manage to obtain the remaining seal in the Black Tortoise Palace, it will still be impossible for me to learn that secret technique. Too bad, too bad. Ling Han shook his head. Though this heavenly venerable seal could be severed by its master, that was done with the price of ripping off a corner of their own mind. For heavenly venerates, that was still a severe injury. Whatever offer he made, it was probably impossible that that woman would surrender the Azure Dragon seal to him. Moreover, she was a 4th tier, and an extremely powerful 4th tier at that. If he really dared to raise this issue, she might turn around and refine him instead. Similarly, she would also be able to obtain the seals of the 4 directions, and obtain that secret technique. Let's go to the Black Tortoise Palace. Ling Han stood up, and after finding the exit, he immediately left. Then, after distinguishing his directions, he headed towards the Black Tortoise Palace. Not much longer afterwards, he saw the 3rd burial mound. He entered, his eyes sweeping over his surroundings. He saw that there were still many people gathered at the plaza, but this was very similar to the White Tiger Palace. Everyone was not lining up, but rather scattered in 2s and 3s, looking towards the entrance into the palace. There was someone sealing off the entrance there as well. Chapter 28-21 28-21 Number 1 Prodigy? Chapter 28-21 28-21 Number 1 Prodigy? 28-21 Number 1 Prodigy? Ling Han sighed. Why did people keep doing this kind of thing? He made some queries, and as it turned out, these were not the first people to seal off the entrance. 30,000 years ago, there were already 4th tier elites sealing off the entrance here, but as their disciples and descendants arrived, and were unable to pass the test after all of them had made an attempt, these 4th tiers left helplessly, switching to another palace to try again. However, after this batch of people left, not many centuries passed before a different batch of 4th tier elites blocked the entrance. They, too, had their descendants and disciples that were making their way here. Ling Han shook his head. There really was no end to this. This also showed how valuable a heavenly venerable seal was. If a fourth tier could not obtain it for themselves, they could place their hopes on their descendants and disciples. In fact, they could even forcefully extract it from them once the latter had obtained it. With the temptation of heavenly venerable seal, what could not be discarded? In Ling Han's heart, family was of the utmost importance, but in the eyes of the majority of heavenly venerates, increasing their own strength was the only thing that mattered to them. Ling Han's gaze wandered around. He was looking for Ping Xinghai to see if he could trick him again. His gaze searched all around, and he couldn't help but sigh. Ping Xinghai wasn't here. If Ping Xinghai knew about this, he would probably curse fluidly. You are really hanging on to me, aren't you? What to do now? After passing 2 tests, and obtaining the inheritance comprising 2 heavenly venerable seals, Ling Han was sure that he would definitely be able to obtain the heavenly venerable seal inside the Black Tortoise Palace. But if he couldn't enter, then there was no need to even mention it. He thought long and hard, but the number of 4th tiers that were blocking the entrance had reached as many as 7. Even if Ping Xinghai had really come, and Ling Han had managed to successfully trick him into doing the same thing again, the chances of his being able to sneak in through the chaos would have been close to 0. Moreover, would Ping Xinghai be tricked again after falling for Ling Han's trick before? He was not that stupid. Ling Han decided he'd just wait and see. Ling Han sat down at one side. He would definitely not give up the chance of obtaining this heavenly venerable seal. As he sat, another 2 years passed. In this period, a great many people had come and left. Some veterans left helplessly, and some rookies, relying on their master and clan background, wanted to approach to ask for mercy, but they were all refused, and no one could enter into the palace. A thought suddenly flashed in Ling Han's mind, and his eyes snapped open abruptly. Here was another person. This was a mighty figure, a frightening aura exuding from him, turning into flames that unfurled around him. Ling Han's eyes involuntarily narrowed. This was someone familiar. Zhuang Feirei. When a heavenly venerable seal had appeared, even if some people got the news later than others, as long as they got wind of the news, they would definitely come to take a look. Close to 1 million years had passed, and Zhuang Feirei's aura had become more stable and frightening. Clearly, his battle prowess had improved considerably. He was a naturally gifted prodigy. In the past, he was known as the strongest prodigy. It was only afterwards, when he was trapped in the 2nd spatial level, that everyone thought he had died, and with the abrupt appearance of people like Lin Yolian and Xian Chihu, he was gradually forgotten. However, his strength could not be denied. At present, he was definitely an overlord among 4th tiers, and there were few that could match him. As he headed straight for the entrance of the palace, it seemed like there was lightning flashing with every step he took. Ling Han's eyes lit up. This was an opportunity. He moved quietly and very carefully because once Zhuang Feirei discovered his presence, the latter would definitely turn around to suppress him first. Stop, my friend! A 4th tier stretched out his hand and pressed downwards. Scram! Zhuang Feirei was extremely domineering. Within 4th tier, there was no need for him to pay anyone any regard. If he didn't like the looks of them, he would move directly. He was invincible. You have gone too far, another 4th tier said. If you guys don't scram, I'll send you flying. Zhuang Feirei moved directly, charging towards those 7 4th tier elites. How dare you! Those 7 4th tiers all humped angrily. You are too arrogant, aren't you? Being able to advance to the heavenly venerable tier, which of them was not a gifted prodigy? There was already no such thing as differences between king tiers and monarch tiers. If their cultivation level was completely equal, battle prowess should be equal as well. Isn't fighting against 7 all alone just asking for a beating? The 7 4th tier elites all humped coldly, and moved to suppress Zhuang Feirei. Pun pun pun! The 8 of them fought intensely, and what caused everyone's jaws to drop in absolute shock and astonishment was that not only had Zhuang Feirei not fallen into a disadvantage, he had an absolute upper hand. Impossible! Everyone was dumbfounded. 7 fourth tiers, all of them at peak stage 4th tier at that, combined their efforts, and actually were no match for a single 4th tier? It should be known that Zhuang Feirui was only a middle stage 4th tier at best, and it was possible that he had not attained that level yet. How could he be so strong? This is a supreme prodigy! Someone exclaimed shakily. Who is this guy? You guys don't even know who he is? Zhuang Feirui, the #1 prodigy of several epochs ago. What? It's actually him? Why did I hear that he had died a long time ago? That's right. I also heard that he had died. Died? He had only been a 3rd tier then, but he had been trapped for several epochs in a danger zone of the realm battlefield. Not only had he not died, he had even advanced further, and stepped into the 4th tier. That is too amazing. Of course, as expected of the #1 prodigy. Everyone was exclaiming in shock, and amidst their surprised exclamations, Zhuang Feirui was also defeating those 7 4th tiers in a clean sweep. Gathering several dozen powers of dimension when he had been a 1st tier was an advantage that would be eternally maintained by any 1st tier. However, the higher the cultivation level, the further this advantage would be considerably weakened. It could not be helped. Aside from Ling Han, others would only consolidate their power of dimensions into a core, which had limited growth. Zhuang Feirui swept his eyes over his surroundings, appearing insufferably arrogant. He had the right to do that because he was the #1 prodigy, who was unmatched among his equals. Who would be able to match him? Show off, Ling Han inwardly said. This guy had probably forgotten how he had been harshly thrashed by Ling Han in a battle of equal cultivation levels, hadn't he? However, without the suppression of cultivation level, Zhuang Feirui was indeed overwhelmingly strong. Without anyone at or above the 5th tier, who would be capable of suppressing him. Xiao! A figure entered from the entrance, revealing an extremely beautiful and graceful outline. This was an exquisite beauty. Even if everyone here were heavenly venerates, they still had their breaths taken away upon their first glimpse of her. Yet Ling Han's eyes narrowed. This was shockingly that mysterious woman from the White Tiger Palace, who had been inconceivably strong. She had already obtained the inheritance of the Azure Dragon Palace? She definitely had, or it was impossible that she would have taken so much time to make it here. This exquisite beauty walked gracefully and elegantly. She seemed to be walking lightly and extremely relaxedly, but her speed was considerably fast. Very soon, she drew near to the doors of the palace. En? Zhuang Feirui glanced over, revealing a hint of displeasure. He did very much admire this beauty's exquisite appearance, but didn't she know the rule? First come, first served. He had just overthrown those bullies blocking the doorway, and she simply wanted to come and reap the benefits without saying a word. Zhuang Feirui stretched out his arm to stop her. Friend, don't you think that you should ask me for my opinion first? That mysterious woman's steps paused momentarily. An ancient historical site is not something that belongs to anyone, so why do I need to ask permission from you? Zhuang Feirui's eyes sharpened. Friend, you have gone too far. He had always been the overbearing type. Even if this woman was incomparably beautiful, so what? If she went against his will, he would mercilessly suppress her anyway. This was a chance. Ling Han moved silently. He, for one, knew that this mysterious woman was extremely powerful. At the very least, she would not be weaker than Zhuang Feirui. If the two of them started to battle, that would be the best chance for him to slip into the palace. That exquisite beauty ignored Zhuang Feirui completely, and walked delicately and gracefully, continuing on her way. Chapter 28-22 There was no comparison at all. Chapter 28-22 There was no comparison at all. 28-22 There was no comparison at all. Humph! Zhuang Feirui reached out, and tried to grab the stunning beauty. Pun! The stunning beauty gave a light wave of her hand, yet it caused a surge of incomparably terrifying power, and Zhuang Feirui was sent flying and became a small dot in an instant, vanishing from sight. Everyone gaped and was speechless, as if they had seen a ghost. This had to be fake, right? Zhuang Feirui was already so powerful, having suppressed 7 4th-tier heavenly venerates solely with his own strength. However, when faced with this stunning beauty, he wasn't her match at all. This woman. What kind of monster was she? Ling Han was also taken aback. He had known that this woman had been extremely strong, but he had never imagined her to be this strong. Although she has achieved such a feat, this stunning beauty didn't seem to care, as if she was just brushing off some dust. Instead, she glanced around, and her gaze locked on Ling Han very quickly. Ling Han suddenly felt like he was a mouse being watched by a cat, which caused him to feel a cold chill running through his body. This woman was indeed too strong. "Why sneak around?" the woman said, and made a gesture of invitation towards the revolving doorway of light. Ling Han was surprised. "Aren't you afraid that I'll get my hands on the heavenly venerable seal first before you do?" However, when the other party had already invited him in such a manner, how could he bring himself to back down? He took large strides and walked towards the doorway of light. Zhuang Feirui flew back from a distance. Immediately he gritted his teeth and said, "Ling Han." He was a 4th tier, and he could see through Ling Han's disguise at a glance. He wanted to make a move, but when the stunning beauty turned her gaze towards him, it caused him to come to a halt. The opponent was at the peak of the 4th tier, and was even more freakish than him. There was no telling how many powers of dimensions she had condensed. It was definitely not something he could match. If he was to step forward to battle, he would be bringing humiliation upon himself. Damn it, there was a heavenly venerable seal this man possessed, which Zhuang Feirui absolutely had to get his hands on. Moreover, Ling Han also caused his reputation to hit rock bottom. If he couldn't kill Ling Han, it would be a stigma that would follow him for life. Ling Han walked over with a smile, and said, "Miss, do you intend to compete with me?" Unexpectedly, the stunning beauty actually nodded. "That's right." "Okay," Ling Han boldly agreed. A woman like herself actually possessed such a gallant spirit. She obviously could have driven him away, or at least grabbed the first opportunity, but instead gave him a chance to compete fairly. If Ling Han hadn't even dared to accept the challenge, then he would have been a man in vain. The two stepped forward together. Shio, they entered the doorway of light. As soon as this stunning beauty left, everyone finally came back to their senses, and relaxed themselves after being in the midst of that extremely oppressive aura. "This woman. Who was she really?" someone murmured. "She's extremely formidable indeed, being able to send even a first-rate prodigy such as Zhuang Feirui flying with a single palm strike. Is there really such a person in the world?" The oppressive atmosphere gradually disappeared, and everyone was full of curiosity about who such a powerful woman was. "Do you really want to know who she is?" someone suddenly said leisurely. Immediately, everyone's gaze turned in the direction of the voice. Even Zhuang Feirui was no exception, as he really wanted to know the identity of this woman. "She is Lin Youlian!" Gasp! Everyone gasped. If Zhuang Feirui was only the number 1 prodigy of his era, then Lin Youlian was the greatest prodigy of all time. Only Xian Qihu could rival her. Of course, there was another Wu Haoyang after him. In comparison, Zhuang Feirui was absolutely nothing. "Lin Youlian! I didn't expect that. Not only is her strength earth-shattering, even her appearance is so beautiful as well. If I could take her as my wife..." Someone began to let their imagination run wild. "The greatest prodigy of all eternity. She truly lives up to the name." Even Zhuang Feirui had nothing further to say. Lin Youlian wasn't merely of a slightly higher level than him, but also far superseded him in terms of natural talent for cultivation. What else could he do besides resigning himself to the situation when faced with such an existence? Who would be capable of having such a beautiful prodigy in his embrace? Zhuang Feirui stepped out and entered the doorway of light without hesitation. His natural talent and strength were indeed not as good as Lin Youlian's, but great opportunities weren't something one could definitely obtain by being strong. Ling Han found himself in a plane again, but the stunning beauty was nowhere to be seen. This was within the spiritual world, so it was normal not to have the existence of the other party. The bodies of both parties should be in the hall right now. There was a flag in the plane, with only one word written on it: defend. Ling Han knew that this was Black Tortoise Palace, so the test had to be related to defense. What could it be? A feeling of danger suddenly tugged at his heart. All of a sudden, he looked up and saw a large stretch of meteors falling from the sky, smashing towards him. It was really a massive stretch, covering the entire area. There was nowhere to hide. Ling Han hastened to use the fists of fury, blasting towards the sky. Pun pun pun, the meteors were shattered into pieces. These pieces were shattered before they fell onto him. The first round of attacks had been perfectly resolved. However, right on the heels of the earlier attack, another large wave of meteors came crashing down, this time with even more force. Ling Han thought of the test at Vermillion Bird Hall. He knew that these attacks would increase in level gradually, in search of his limit, and then would start bombarding wildly within the scope of his limit. This was the real test. He easily resolved this wave, but after several waves of meteors falling, he was also being pushed to his limit. At this time, even if he blasted with fists of fury, there was no way for him to completely resolve the situation. Furthermore, there were great numbers of meteors crashing down violently, which forced him to channel the indestructible Heaven's Scroll to take the attack head-on. This was the main idea of Black Tortoise Palace's test, to take on a beating. Hong, long, more meteors fell, turning into an endless catastrophe. Ling Han had noble ideals, and he didn't believe that he couldn't stop it. Come! Meteors turned into a rain of meteors, coming wave after wave, and requiring him to go all out in resistance. In the face of such an attack, Ling Han was not qualified to fight back, so he could only channel the indestructible Heaven's Scroll. However, the indestructible Heaven's Scroll was only created by a first tier, and had huge limitations. Then again, what could be better than the indestructible Heaven's Scroll as far as defense was concerned? While taking on the beating, Ling Han was also comprehending and improving the deficiencies in the indestructible Heaven's Scroll to adapt it to his current battle prowess. Hong, long, the meteor rain seemed to never stop, one wave after another intending to blast Ling Han to pieces. This was the most annoying part. If one could know how many waves one would need to bear to end it, then at least there would still be hope. But what about now? It could be over right after the next wave, or it could be that one would have to bear tens of thousands of waves more, which was enough to make someone with a strong willpower give up. Ling Han gritted his teeth and continued to persevere. This wasn't a battle, but rather taking a beating, which wasn't in line with his path of cultivation, but for the sake of the heavenly venerable seal and all the more to test his resilience, he was unwilling to back down. As time passed, Ling Han continued to deepen his study of the indestructible Heaven's Scroll, but this indestructible Heaven's Scroll wasn't created by him, and it was improving far from as quickly as fists of fury. This time, what Ling Han really depended on was his willpower. He kept roaring as meteors hit him one after another. It really hurt. 1,000 years, 10,000 years, 100,000 years. It was not until 300,000 years had passed that Ling Han suddenly felt his whole body relax, and then found himself appearing in another place. He had passed the test. At the same time, a strong aura immediately arose from his surroundings, just like a violent storm. Vermillion had also passed the test. Ling Han couldn't help but be filled with admiration. Such a stunning beauty could also withstand the bombardment of 300,000 years. Her willpower was truly amazing. Chapter 28-23 Combining the Seals. Chapter 28-23, 2823 Combining the Seals. 28-23 Combining the Seals. There were only the two of them in the hall. Ling Han wasn't surprised. Even if someone came in halfway, they couldn't resist the impact of the meteor rain, so they were disqualified earlier. Wang, a leg bone appeared, entirely pale golden in color, with a vague, flickering seal on it. Ling Han stretched out his hand, and pressed it on the leg bone. At the same time, Vermillion also stretched out her slender hand and touched the leg bone. A ray of light burst out, and the leg bone emitted an overwhelming brilliance, but this was not all. Ling Han's and Vermillion's mind shone brightly as well. Wang, 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 3 seals rose from the crown of their respective heads. One turned into a white tiger, one turned into a vermilion bird, and one turned into an azure dragon, while the light rising from the leg bone also turned into a black tortoise. Ling Han couldn't help being stunned. Wasn't it that a heavenly venerable seal could only be transmitted, and not passed on as an inheritance? But he could clearly sense the azure dragon seal, and was able to completely grasp it. This is a combination seal. Vermillion started speaking. When there is resonance between the 4 seals, then it would materialize, but it is only limited to a duration when the seal of the black tortoise hasn't dissipated. She paused for a moment, and then added, "Hurry up and comprehend it, there's not much time." Ling Han quickly regained his composure. Who cared what the reason was? His priority now was to master the 2 seals of the azure dragon and black tortoise. Both of them sat down cross-legged, imprinting the heavenly venerable seals firmly in their minds. 3 days later, the golden leg bone disintegrated into specks of light before vanishing without a trace. However, Ling Han revealed a look of satisfaction as he had imprinted the 2 seals of azure dragon and black tortoise in his mind. He didn't dare to be careless, and began studying them again. The same was true for Vermillion. She had a bigger task at hand as she needed to comprehend 3 seals. Time passed quietly, and soon it was already 20,000 years later. Ling Han opened his eyes. He had already mastered all 4 direction seals. A single seal could increase his cultivation speed by 17 times, and it was the same for the increase in battle prowess. Moreover, the 4 seals could actually be channeled simultaneously in battle, which would be terrifying indeed as it would cause his power to soar by 39 times. What was going on here? If the 4 seals could be superimposed, shouldn't it be 68 times? What was the meaning of this 39 times? Moreover, the effects of heavenly venerable seals couldn't be superimposed. No matter how many seals were being channeled, the one which could truly exert its power would be the strongest one. This ought to be related to combination seals. Right. Ling Han thought of what Vermillion had said before, and was absolutely confident in his theory, but the other party was still in the midst of meditation with her eyes closed. It would be impossible for him to wake up the other party to pose his query, thereby interrupting the other party's comprehension. This would be creating a deadly feud. Moreover, it seemed that Vermillion had long expected that they would jointly unlock the 4th heavenly venerable seal, which would allow both of them to master the 4 direction seals. So that was the reason why the other party had especially invited Ling Han to enter the doorway of light together, and to take on the test at the same time, completely in synchrony. Ling Han thought about it, and decided to continue meditating while waiting for Vermillion as he wanted clarification. Of course, he wouldn't waste time, because the heavenly venerate 4 directions had said that if he could master all the 4 seals, he would be able to comprehend a unique skill contained within them. Ling Han started to make deductions. Soon, he had some clues, and was slowly making progress. After 9,000 years had passed, Ling Han stood up abruptly, and then punched out. Boom! Azure dragon, white tiger, vermilion bird, and black tortoise all appeared and charged forward. As the 4 forms materialized, power soared exponentially. Ling Han channeled the 4 direction seals, and simultaneously punched out for the second time. This time, the extraordinary sight was even more astonishing. It was as though all 4 divine beasts had solidified, bearing a massive destructive aura. When the secret technique and the 4 direction seals are being channeled at the same time, the power released is truly amazing. Ling Han was filled with admiration. This was the ultimate technique created by a 5th tier heavenly venerate, so it could be used at least up to the battle prowess of a 5th tier. However, my true support would be the Fists of Fury, which must not be discarded. While waiting, Ling Han practiced the fist technique. After another millennium had passed, Vermillion finally woke up from her state of meditation. If you have any questions, just ask. Where I'm capable of answering, I will do my best to answer. This was the first sentence that the woman said, as if she had read Ling Han's mind. It really wasn't good for a woman to be so smart. It would cause a man not to have any sense of accomplishment. Ling Han chuckled. Miss, if I may ask, what is a combination seal? According to my father's statistics, there are a total of 999 heavenly venerable seals. If they can be fully mastered and formed into sequences, then each seal can resonate with one another and exert unimaginable power, Vermillion said. She paused slightly and then said, However, even if you don't master all these seals, but have obtained the adjacent seals, they can still resonate and give rise to amplification of power. It's just that the effect will be slightly inferior. Ling Han gave an O and nodded. No wonder his strength wasn't increased by 68 times when he had channeled the 4 direction seals simultaneously, but rather 39 times over. He was stumped for words. If he could further obtain adjacent seals, then wouldn't his battle prowess be increased 50 times, 100 times, or 1,000 times? You guessed it right, Vermillion said. So, even if you have the same number of heavenly venerable seals, and they are of the same level, but one party's seals are a series, while the others are not, there will be a huge difference in battle prowess between the two. She glanced at Ling Han and added, Since I started this, I will simply explain some more. The 999 heavenly venerable seals are divided into 9 levels, and each level has 111 seals. My father proceeded to sort them. The first level of heavenly venerable seals can increase battle prowess by about 4 to 10 times. The second level, between 11 and 20 times. Going by the same logic, the 9th level will reach between 81 and 90 times. However, don't think that low-level seals are useless. Vermillion looked solemn. Due to the continuity and ability of combination of the heavenly venerable seals, we absolutely mustn't ignore any of the heavenly venerable seals. Moreover, even if it is a low-level seal, as long as it can be combined, the power upon being channeled together cannot be underestimated. Ling Han nodded. His eyes were really open today. In his thoughts, he was becoming more and more curious about the identity of this stunning beauty. What was her background, and how did she come to know so many secrets? He couldn't help asking, Miss, if I may ask, have we met before? Being a dignified 4th tier, much less someone who could suppress a super genius like Zhuang Feirui, why would she behave so courteously to a 1st tier like Ling Han? Vermillion smiled faintly. My father and brother think very highly of brother Lin. Ling Han was taken aback for a moment, and suddenly a conjecture surged in his heart. He said, You are Vermillion! Besides this prodigious woman, who else could suppress Zhuang Feirui with one move? Apart from Lin Luo, how many other people would know that there were 999 heavenly venerable seals in the Genesis world? And would even know about such secrets as the combination seals? Vermillion smiled faintly. Correct. It was indeed as expected. Ling Han nodded and sighed inwardly. He owed the Lin clan another favor. Brother Ling, senior brother Zhou Heng has already told my father about your conjecture. My father actually has the same idea, but no one is hysteria, so it is impossible to know how far it can go, Vermillion said with a solemn voice. My father asked me to send word to brother Ling to persist in your efforts and keep climbing to the top. In the future you will definitely be an important link in quelling the disaster brought about by hysteria. Chapter 28-24 Good times don't last long? Chapter 28-24 2824 Good times don't last long? 2824 Good times don't last long? Ling Han felt extremely flattered by the praise. A paramount 7th tier heavenly venerate saw such promise in him? During Ling Han's time in the realm battlefield, Lin Luo had already thought highly of him and been optimistic about his future. As such, he had given Ling Han quite a bit of help. Meanwhile, his 3 disciples Zhou Heng, Chu Hao, and Lin Xiaoyang and his son had further provided Ling Han with a lot of help. It was thanks to Ling Han's time cultivating at the Lin clan that he was able to reach the 8th heaven at such a lightning-quick speed. I must express my sincere gratitude to Senior Lin, Ling Han said. Keep up the good work, I also have high hopes for you, Vermillion said with a nod. There was a look of encouragement on her face. She paused for a moment before saying, Let's go. The two of them quickly found an exit. Upon stepping through it, they immediately found themselves in a vast plain. Vermillion waved her hand before gracefully disappearing into the distance. Ling Han couldn't help but sigh with emotion. Was there a man who could capture the attention of this fairy-like woman? He shook his head and pushed away these thoughts. This had nothing to do with him. He already had a warm and loving family. Ling Han left the ancient tomb. Regardless of whether it was the heavenly venerable seals or the secret technique concealed within it, he had already obtained them all. Thus, was there any need to stay? Moreover, his identity had already been exposed, so it was certain that many elites had their sights set on him. As such, his best option was to leave. After arriving back at the world's paramount martial academy, Ling Han reunited with the Empress and the others. After all, they had already agreed to gather there if they were separated from each other in the ancient tomb. None of the others had gained anything from this trip. However, after learning that Ling Han had obtained all 4 of the heavenly venerable seals, they all felt extremely happy for him. It was a shame, though, that Ling Han couldn't teach the 4 forms technique to the others, as this required the support of 4 heavenly venerable seals. Without these seals, all attempts would be futile. "Let's go, let's visit our daughter," Ling Han said with a smile. He and the Empress changed their appearance a bit before entering the martial academy. However, after walking around the entire martial academy, they discovered that their daughter still had yet to return. Ling Han couldn't help but feel a little worried. His daughter was far too beautiful, so what would happen if she encountered a man with impure motives? He clearly knew that Ling Shi possessed power that could rival pseudo-heavenly venerates, yet he still felt extremely worried at this moment. This was his worry as a father. "I can't help but feel worried," Ling Han said. "I need to look for her." The Empress felt much more relaxed and at ease than him, but since Ling Han had decided to look for his daughter, she naturally wouldn't be against it. They set off to look for Ling Shi. Several years later, they arrived at a small town. According to some records, Ling Shi had once stayed here 7 years ago. They were very close to finding their daughter. "From what I've gathered, Ling Shi was searching for the treasures of an ancient celestial king. This is the most likely location, so why don't we wait here? We might come across her at any moment," Ling Han said. The Empress nodded in agreement. They settled down, waiting to reunite with their daughter. Ling Han now possessed 13 heavenly venerable seals, and if he channeled them together, his cultivation speed could be increased 109-fold. This seemed astounding. However, taking into account the boundless powers of dimension within him, this speed was in fact still very slow. At the very least, the cultivation speed of the Empress was far quicker than his. Right now, she had already reached the late stage of the first tier, and wasn't far from reaching the peak stage. As for Ling Han, he had only just discovered the path to reach the middle stage. However, it would still be quite a long time until he actually reached it. Oh, heavenly venerable seals! He still needed many more of them. As they waited, 37 years passed. This wasn't a very long time. After all, spending tens of thousands of years on some random adventure was nothing in the eyes of Ling Han. On this day, astonishing thunder and lightning suddenly boomed through heaven and earth, causing the ground to quake, and making it seem like the sky was about to collapse. Ling Han's eyes suddenly snapped open, and he gazed into the distance. It was as if nothing could escape his gaze, no matter how far. A smile spread across his face. However, his expression quickly froze, and it appeared indescribably strange. Every father who had experienced his daughter marrying would understand what this expression represented. Little Shi has a companion," the Empress said. She could also see Ling Shi flying toward the small town. However, she wasn't alone, and there was an elegant-looking man next to her. He appeared handsome and extraordinary. "This bastard," Ling Han murmured. He felt a murderous urge. It wasn't long before Ling Shi and the man arrived above the small town. The Empress reached out with her divine sense, causing Ling Shi to instantly stop in her tracks. "What's wrong, junior sister Ling?" the young man asked. Ling Shi wore a surprised expression as she replied, "My mother's here." Oh? The young man hurriedly nodded before saying, Then we must pay Auntie a visit. The two of them descended, landing before the inn that Ling Han and the Empress were staying in. The Empress walked out first. They hadn't seen their daughter for many years, so even with her aloof personality, she still missed her a little. Mom! Ling Shi exclaimed as she jumped into the Empress' embrace. After so many years, she had already grown up and become a young lady whose beauty was in no way inferior to the Empress. Standing together, they were like two lotuses who were equally beautiful and equally breathtaking. The Empress lightly stroked her daughter's head. As for the young man, she completely ignored him. To say nothing of the fact that he had no intimate relationship with Ling Shi, even if they were married, the Empress would still definitely ignore him. There was zero possibility that she would like him the more that she looked at him. Mom, where's Dad? Ling Shi asked. Upstairs, the Empress replied as she pointed up. Huh! Then why isn't Dad coming down? Ling Shi asked in confusion. In the Ling clan, it was definitely Ling Han who doted on her the most. Now that they hadn't seen each other for so long, he was actually remaining seated upstairs? He's a bit angry right now, the Empress replied with a smile. Ling Shi felt even more confused. Angry? Angry about what? Was there anything to be angry about? She hurriedly ran upstairs, saying, I'm going to see Dad first. She had no time to care about her companion. The young man bowed and said, Greetings, Auntie. I'm Hao Jing. He appeared neither haughty nor humble. He either was an extremely proud person, or he had an extremely powerful background. Otherwise, how would he dare to act so casually before a first-tier heavenly venerate as a pseudo-heavenly venerate? The Empress made no reply. Apart from Ling Han and her daughter, everyone else was worthless in her eyes. Hao Jing couldn't help but feel slightly awkward after being given the cold shoulder. He could only raise his hand to rub his nose. Upstairs, Ling Shi immediately saw the sitting Ling Han after entering the room. However, his eyes were tightly shut, and it was as if he were sleeping. She walked over and called softly, Dad! Ling Han ignored her. Only after Ling Shi called him a few more times did he finally open his eyes, saying, It's been so long, yet you didn't come back to visit. Xie returned once. However, Ling's city already didn't exist, Ling Shi said. But I know just how capable Dad is, so I knew that there definitely wouldn't be any dangers. Of course, your dad. Ling Han was just about to brag. However, he immediately stopped himself, knowing that he couldn't let his daughter change the topic. He cleared his throat and asked, Who's that brat outside? Ling Shi came to a sudden realization. No wonder her dad was feeling angry. It was all because of jealousy. She couldn't help but find this funny. He's just a senior from the Martial Academy. We coincidentally traveled to the ruins together to search for treasures. He's called Hao Jing. Hao Jing? Good times don't last long, one? Ling Han shook his head, musing. What a crappy name. Ling Shi was rendered speechless. Ling Han disliked him so much that even his name needed to be made fun of. Chapter 28-25 Interrogation. Chapter 28-25, 2825 Interrogation. 2825 Interrogation. Dad, don't misunderstand, I and Hao Jing only came across each other by coincidence. There's nothing between us, Ling Shi explained with a smile. Really? Ling Han asked in suspicion. Really? Ling Shi said with a nod. Only at this moment did Ling Han chuckle and say, And I was just thinking, that pretty boy has such inferior looks, so how could he be worthy of my precious daughter? Ling Shi was rendered speechless. Hao Jing also had a powerful background, with his father being a fifth-tier heavenly venerate. In the Martial Academy, he belonged to the group of people who could do as they pleased. She naturally had no intentions of praising Hao Jing, since there was nothing between them anyway. Moreover, she didn't want Ling Han to draw any incorrect conclusions. She accompanied Ling Han downstairs, where they saw Hao Jing awkwardly standing around. Meanwhile, the breathtaking Empress was like a lone moon appreciating her own beauty, completely ignoring Hao Jing. This caused him to feel extremely uneasy and fidgety. Upon seeing Ling Han, Hao Jing hurriedly walked over to pay his respects, saying, "Greetings, uncle. I'm Hao Jing." He appeared like a modest and respectful young man. Good times don't last long." Ling Han immediately caught himself, realizing that he couldn't say this to Hao Jing's face. Hao Jing, why did you come here?" He was confident that his precious daughter had no feelings for this man. However, this Hao Jing was definitely interested in his daughter. Thus, he had to take preventative measures. Fuck. This person actually dared to covet his precious little daughter. Hao Jing's expression involuntarily darkened. He was a pseudo-heavenly venerate who was imminently going to ascend to the paramount ranks of the world, yet this person was actually cursing him. However, because of Ling Shi, he naturally couldn't lose his temper. Moreover, he couldn't gauge Ling Han's strength, either, and he could only sense that this person was as vast and boundless as the sea. However, there was no aura around him, and he appeared just like an ordinary person. This was because Ling Han wasn't simply nurturing the powers of dimension inside him like other ordinary heavenly venerates. Instead, he was nurturing these dimensions in each individual cell, forming a myriad of mini-Genesis worlds. These cells combined to form a perfect whole, so it was only natural that not a sliver of power or aura would leak into the surroundings. Of course, this was unless he desired to do so. "Uncle, you really like to tell jokes," Hao Jing said with a smile, clearing up the awkwardness in the air. He then continued, "I also wanted to explore this ancient ruin, and I coincidentally came across junior sister Ling on the way." Ling Han chuckled and said, "Aren't you a pseudo-heavenly venerate? Is there still any need to go to the ruins of a celestial king? Can this help your cultivation?" Hao Jing involuntarily faltered upon hearing this. However, his reaction was extremely quick, and he immediately replied, "In truth, I especially followed junior sister Ling there. This ruin was left by a ninth heaven celestial king, but junior sister Ling is only at the fourth heaven, so I was worried about her safety." Oh, what flowery words! Not only is he earnest, but also hinting care for Ling Shi's well-being. There's also a hidden expression of love, yet it's done in an extremely natural manner. Even if Ling Shi isn't interested in him, it will still be difficult to reject, no? He's quite experienced at doing this. Ling Han felt an even greater dislike for the young man. How could he hand his daughter over to such a person? "How did it go?" he asked. "Not bad. However, in the end, we triggered a restriction left by the ninth heaven celestial king, and caused the entire ruin to collapse," Hao Jing replied calmly. This was only natural. He was a pseudo-heavenly venerate, so even if the ninth heaven celestial king came back to life, they still wouldn't be able to harm him at all. Not to mention that this was only a restriction placed after their death. Ling Han kept the conversation going with a series of questions, allowing him to learn almost everything he could about Hao Jing. In fact, it could be said that Hao Jing's background was quite astonishing. He was the only son of a fifth-tier heavenly venerate, and he was also quite an extraordinary talent himself. In just 3 billion years, he had already become a pseudo-heavenly venerate. How many people could achieve this? If it had been any other fourth heaven celestial king that had been pursued by Hao Jing like this, perhaps she would have already offered her heart and body to him. However, even though Ling Shi appeared extremely calm and indifferent, she was in fact just as proud as the Empress. This kind of prodigy couldn't catch her attention. At the very least, Hao Jing hadn't found a way to catch her attention. Since his daughter didn't like him, Ling Han couldn't be bothered interrogating Hao Jing any further either. He turned to Ling Shi and asked, "Darling, are you going to come home for a few days this time?" "Sure," Ling Shi replied with a nod. After being apart for so many years, it was indeed time for her to go home and accompany her parents. "All right, then rest up now. We'll set off tomorrow," Ling Han said with a wave. His daughter had just come back from an adventure, so she naturally needed to take a good rest. In fact, Ling Shi also had a small world inside her. Upon activating it, she could possess power that rivaled those at the pseudo-heavenly venerable tier. Thus, how could a restriction set by a measly ninth heaven celestial king pose any danger to her? Would she be tired? Would she need to rest? However, one had to remember that Ling Han was a father, one who doted on his daughter like there was no tomorrow. Thus, his actions couldn't be explained with reason. The four of them settled down. However, Hao Jing quickly went to look for Ling Shi. "Junior sister Ling, your parents are quite mighty and intimidating. I was so afraid that I went weak at the knees," Hao Jing purposefully said. Ling Shi smiled faintly and said, "It's rare for my dad to be so serious. He's actually quite easy to get along with." Hao Jing grumbled in his mind. That was called easy to get along with? Toward her, perhaps. He chuckled and said, "Under your father's interrogation, I even revealed the time that I stole eggs from a bird's nest when I was young." "Oh, that's right, I still don't know your father's name." Ling Shi hesitated for a brief moment. She knew just how much of a trouble magnet Ling Han was. Even now, there were some in the martial academy who wanted to give him a good beating. According to rumors, there were more so hundreds of elites in the Flaming Frost realm who wanted to capture her father. Why did she need to conceal her identity as Ling Han's daughter? This was naturally because Ling Han didn't want those he had offended to take their revenge on her. Ling Shi initially didn't want to say. However, since Hao Jing had already met her father, and since he was also being so earnest, it would be wrong of her to lie to him, even if she didn't accept his feelings. Thus, after thinking over this for a moment, she replied, "My dad's name is Ling Han." "Ling Han?" Hao Jing murmured. He then wore an ashamed expression as he said, "Sorry, junior sister Ling, I've never heard of your father's great name before." Ling Shi didn't mind this. Even though Ling Han's evil name was still talked about in the martial academy, it had indeed already been a long time since those events. The disciples from that time had either already died in battle or already become heavenly venerates and left the martial academy. Thus, there were indeed few students who still knew Ling Han's name. As such, it was no surprise that Hao Jing hadn't heard the legends about Ling Han. "However, uncle should be a heavenly venerate, right?" Hao Jing asked. "Even though his aura was hidden, he still caused me to feel a powerful pressure." Ling Shi nodded, saying, "My dad is a first-tier heavenly venerate." "No wonder!" Hao Jing exclaimed as he slapped his thigh. "Auntie is also as beautiful as a fairy, so it's no wonder that she gave birth to an exquisite beauty like junior sister Ling." Ling Shi simply replied with a faint smile. She was naturally a gentle and quiet person, so she didn't feel anything from such words of praise. Hao Jing also knew that his words of flattery had been useless, so he smiled and said, "Junior sister, rest well, I'll take my leave first." Ling Shi politely saw him out. Creak. The door swung shut. Hao Jing's smile slowly disappeared, with a sharp glint appearing in his eyes. "Ling Han! It's actually Ling Han! Who would have thought that I would meet that rumored freak here? However, this is truly an opportunity granted by the heavens," he murmured in a soft voice that only he could hear. Chapter 28-26 True Nature Unmasked? Chapter 28-26 True Nature Unmasked? 28-26 True Nature Unmasked? "Why are you suddenly smiling so strangely?" the Empress asked. Ling Han wagged his finger and said, "Say, someone's good times truly won't last long." "You discovered something?" the Empress asked. "Not yet. However, I'll keep an eye on him," Ling Han said. He had naturally been worried about his daughter staying in the same room with that unfamiliar man, so he had involuntarily cast his divine sense over. With his power, how could the pseudo-heavenly venerate in Hao Jing notice his presence? Ling Han had heard everything, including Hao Jing's murmurings that Hao Jing thought no one else could hear. Ling Han's senses were far too sharp. He clearly knew who I was, yet he purposefully pretended that he had never heard of me before. Just from this point alone, there's something fishy going on with this brat, Ling Han said. However, I want to see what other tricks he has up his sleeve. The Empress didn't pay much heed to this. She was far too proud, so these matters were naturally not worthy of her attention. They set off again on the next day. They naturally couldn't return to Ling City. Moreover, Ling Han didn't know if the Ling City had been destroyed by those heavenly venerates in their rage. Thus, they picked out a random place to settle and build another Ling City. Heavenly venerates could construct things with just a single thought. Before long, another Ling City appeared before them. Everyone came out from their spatial god tools and spatial celestial tools to do what they needed. In fact, Ling Han hadn't wanted to settle down so quickly. However, in order to probe Hao Jing's true motives, he decided to give him a chance. Of course, it wasn't necessary for him to put in so much effort. He could have directly captured Hao Jing and interrogated him. He was confident that Hao Jing would spill the beans. However, Ling Han decided to do everything in an open and transparent manner, thereby granting Hao Jing a clear and unconfused death. "You're just bored," the Empress remarked, hitting the nail on the head. Ling Han laughed heartily. He was indeed bored, and it was because of this boredom that he decided to play this little game with Hao Jing. Even so, Ling Han naturally wouldn't waste his time. He continued to cultivate while keeping an eye out for any potential heavenly venerable seals appearing at the same time. Even though the Flaming Frost Realm is the only transcendent dimension, the Genesis world is a humongous place, so there are definitely opportunities hidden in every corner, Ling Han said to himself. However, I'm only a single person, so even though I can travel through dimensions, my senses can't do the same. Thus, even if heavenly venerable seals appear in other worlds, I won't hear any news about them. As such, how can I obtain them? Can I create a large number of clones? They don't need to be powerful, and they simply need to act as scouts. Ling Han's heart thumped in excitement. All dimensions had heavenly venerates, and after so many years, it was without a doubt that many of them had passed away. Perhaps they had failed to ascend to a higher level, or perhaps they had fallen in battle. After many years, it was entirely possible that their inheritances would appear. Ling Han was a resolute person, so he immediately started to forge and refine clones. They don't need to be on the level of heavenly venerates. The ninth heaven is good enough. Ling Han felt like his standards were quite low. However, even in the Flaming Frost Realm, ninth heaven celestial kings were still top-notch elites. In Ling Han's eyes, however, they were only good enough. He took a bit of his flesh, and injected into it a sliver of powers of dimension. He then placed within it a tiny bit of his divine sense. Thereupon, a clone was completed. At the end of the day, this is only a rough creation. Even though it's at the ninth heaven, it can only last for 100 million years. After that, the powers of dimension will disappear, and its body will collapse. The sliver of divine sense will return to me, and I'll have to repeat this process again. Ling Han would need to repeat this step once every 100 million years. Even though this was troublesome, it was absolutely worth it when taking into account the importance of the heavenly venerable seals. Ling Han created many clones, after which he started to travel through the dimensions, leaving a clone in each. He only traveled to high-level and medium-level dimensions, ignoring the countless low-level dimensions. This was because low-level dimensions could only produce second-tier heavenly venerates at most, and second-tier heavenly venerates didn't have the power or right to cultivate and produce heavenly venerable seals. Of course, this was apart from freaks like Ling Han. However, Ling Han's strength was at the third tier, and was only obtained by traveling all through the Genesis world. If he had remained at the low-level dimension, how could he have become such a freak? Thus, he wouldn't waste his time scouting the low-level dimensions. After finishing this up, Ling Han returned to Ling City. Even though he had only traveled to under 2,000 dimensions, he had still spent almost 10,000 years away. This was no secret in Ling City. After all, the city lord hadn't appeared all this time. "Has Hao Jing done anything out of line?" Ling Han asked. "No, he's extremely cautious," Bu Niu replied. While away, Ling Han had tasked her with keeping an eye on Hao Jing. In fact, she was the only one capable of it. Such a task was beneath the Empress, while the others weren't powerful enough to accept it. As for Bu Niu, how could she pass on such a fun task? "All right, then I'll take over now," Ling Han said with a smile. No, Neo wants to continue playing. Let's do it together, Hu Neo said with eagerness. If other heavenly venerates learned of this, they would definitely accuse Ling Han and Hu Neo of ignoring their proper duties. One was a second-tier heavenly venerate, and the other possessed a battle prowess at the third tier, yet they were locked in a battle with a pseudo-heavenly venerate? Were they not holding him in too high a regard? In fact, Ling Han had nothing better to do at this moment. He continued to cultivate, and his clones had already been dispersed. They would notify him if anything significant occurred. Thus, he needed to do something to occupy his time. Hao Jing was extremely patient and composed, not doing anything to raise suspicion. Moreover, he strictly abided by the rules, and was also very respectful when he interacted with Ling Shi. He simply maintained their relationship as senior brother and junior sister, not rushing at all. However, after 10,000 years, Ling Shi asked if she could return to the martial academy. After all, she couldn't stay home forever, could she? After some brief consideration, Ling Han didn't refute her request. However, he also gave his own condition. That was, she needed to stay for another 10 years. Ling Shi didn't know whether to cry or laugh. Her father was like a child sometimes, and he was even haggling over something like this. However, she still accepted this condition. A few days later, Hao Jing made his move. He quietly left Ling City, arriving in a forest. He then retrieved a communication seal, and said, "Senior brother Luo, how's the situation on your side?" "I'm about to succeed," a voice replied, carrying a hint of dissatisfaction. "Junior brother Hao, didn't I say? For safety's sake, we shouldn't communicate before I arrive. The situation has changed. Ling Shi will return to the martial academy in 10 years, so we don't have much time left," Hao Jing said. "You have to arrive before that." "I'll try my best," the person replied. He paused before suddenly chuckling, and saying, "Junior brother Hao, just how enchanting is that mother and daughter duo? You're actually willing to sacrifice a heavenly venerable seal for them? Why don't you give the seal to me? There's no need for you to worry. If you want the heavenly venerable seal, immediately bring that thing over," Hao Jing said in displeasure. All right, who told you to be master's son? My fate is to run around for you," the person said. "Anyhow, I'll go over as quickly as I can." Crackle. The communication seal instantly burst into flames, transforming into ashes. Hao Jing brushed his hands off. This was a special communication seal made by his father, and it could allow him to communicate with his senior brothers and father. Humph! If it weren't for my father cultivating in seclusion, would I leave such benefits to you? He then turned around to gaze in the direction of Ling City, a coveting expression in his eyes. Whoosh! He rapidly returned to Ling City. After he left, Ling Han and Hu Niu appeared from someplace not far away. Hu Niu cocked her head and pondered for a moment before suddenly clapping her hands and saying, "Ah!" Niu remembers. Around 10,000 years ago, he made contact with that senior brother Luo or whatever, and he told him to look for some blood clay or whatnot. This girl. How is she still so unreliable? You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.